I missed the H. Yeah, I did miss the H. Hi, Mildred. How you doing? Hey, Soph.
Howdy.
Hello. Let me just see how the levels are and stuff. Oh, there's Nat in the back.
Yeah, she's just putting some food in the oven.
Hang on a sec. Let me get the title right. Talking psychedelic liberation. Should we call it
my voice be heard?
Your voice can be heard. Hello, hello. Let me just turn it down a little bit, and let me take off this.
I'll stop saying all the cuss words I've been saying then. All the sailor talk. Cut it out.
I can't believe that Sophie said the C word, folks. Cancel them.
Jesus Christ.
Okay, let me take that off that. So the compressor's off YouTube. And let me get your faces on screen. How about that? So
sounds good to me.
How are you both doing, by the way? How was your recording?
Good. I learned about a terrifying guy.
Oh yeah?
You'll see. You'll see when it comes out.
Oh god.
And I learned about a new type of bigotry that I'm excited to.
A thrilling new kind.
Oh,
yeah.
Oh, good. My favorite thing.
Yeah, so, well, I say go with the classics, but
yeah,
what do I know?
The thing. This is this newfangled kind of bigotry.
People do
Has
love
science gone too far?
People do love innovation. It's one of capitalism's best things. So yeah, why don't you tell, just while I'm sorting this out, why don't you tell the folks in chat about Cringe Corner, because I think that's a good thing to just plug straight away.
Oh, we've started doing a show together on Mildred's channel, Thought Slime. It's a bit of a niche little channel. I don't know if any of you have heard of it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's mostly about feces, genitalia, another thing typically considered ugly or gross. Is my thing.
Yeah, things that the working class would like to escape from, and I think that's what we've really brought you here for today, is to apologize for all the harm you've done to the working class, and that you will now embrace patriotic American socialism.
It's time. It's time for me to grow up, and yeah.
Thank you. I'm so glad to finally hear you say that. Cringe Corner is a show. Seeing as neither of us are actually describing it, Cringe Corner is a show where we tell each other weird internet nonsense that's embarrassing that we found. We did one on Wim Hof, a guy who believes he can breathe himself to be resistant to ice. That's what he believes.
He's very good at ice, but beyond that, it's difficult to say whether his claims stand up to scrutiny.
I told Mildred about the Island Boys, a cryptocurrency white rapper duo. Then we lost the footage, but we might
that
re-record
episode
it at some point.
Been lost to time. That's the lost episode.
No.
The lost episode.
Oh my god!
Maybe if people are really into Cringe Corner, we can redo Island Boys as a treat.
As a treat. Just a treat. Yeah. Okay. Well, yeah. I'm sure. Lots of people in the chat know who both of you are. But Sophie, do you want to just tell people where people can find you? All that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Well, I'm Sophie. All my stuff is at Sophie from Mars, either Sophie from Mars all one word or Sophie_FRM_Mars. If you're looking on platforms, it'll be one of those. I'm on Patreon and Twitch and Twitter and YouTube and Instagram and all the stuff. And but if you go to patreon.com/Sophie from Mars, it's the hub of all the stuff I do. I make essays, do media analysis, political stuff. I'm actually going to be doing a show with Mule, our beloved DJ Mule, and Bad Bunny and Tim from Conquest of Dread, starting first Sunday of next year, every Sunday from then on. 2nd of January.
2nd of January. Oh.
Every Sunday from then on, talking about like the concrete steps from here to a better world. It's kind of just a commie roundtable. There might even be some famous faces. Am I pointing the right way? This way.
Other way.
There might even be some people who you already know might come by at some point. Could happen.
That could be cool.
I also have a podcast called Rolling with Rainbows, where we do tabletop stuff. It's cool and queer and fun. Check it out. There you go.
Very cool. And what about you, Mildred?
I think the easiest way for people to find my work would be to go to youtube.com/Sophie from Mars, and then click on the channels tab, and then scroll down where there's a thing called Some Channels I Like. You can, I think it's randomized, but sometimes my channel will appear there. Just keep refreshing until it shows up.
There you go.
And then you can find my videos. They're comedy videos that people keep politicizing. I don't really understand why.
I keep politics out of comedy, personally.
As I say, I was a kid like you, or at least I was, until I found Evil Gorgo's magic jewel, and he tricked me. And now every time I sneeze, I'm a monster by mistake. So it's basically
that makes a lot of sense.
Cool. TOS nipples on screen, says Lilith in chat.
Yeah, there are nipples on stream. This is the crux of the stream. Today we're going to be talking about things with nipples, things that make you think you have more nipples than you might normally have, and things that might make you attracted to nipples that you didn't think that you previously
It's the nipple
were.
stream. Yeah, that's what this is all about.
I think I'm on the wrong stream.
I think that every day, to be honest. So yeah, we're talking about psychedelic liberation in all seriousness. So in terms of that, we've not really done much prep for this, really. So I think in terms of like, what does that mean to either of you? Fight for who starts. I don't care.
Mildred, do you want to go first?
I'm too beta to go first.
Yeah, you are beta as fuck. You did that song, right? No, I'm thinking of someone else. Anyway, psychedelic liberation.
And as someone I just love to be compared to, by the way. I think,
yeah, it's just a fun. That was a fun little reference just for you. Psychedelic liberation. I mean, like we already talk a lot about the benefits, the nonsense of the criminalization and persecution of people for marijuana, and now there's a lot of progress is being made on legalizing marijuana. In various places. Sadly, not in normal turf island here, but I think the next front that a lot of people have set their sights on is psychedelic liberation and the legalization and normalization of psychedelics, both from the angle of the law, but also I think that's maybe more of the focus of our stream today, like just more people. I mean, we're not here to endorse crimes. That's never a thing we would do. No. But psychedelic liberation as a topic is about getting more people to try psychedelic drugs, basically.
Yeah.
We're not telling you to do any crimes. They're not going to tell you how cool they're going to make you look, how it's, all your friends are kind of doing it without you.
How you'll end up with really fun stories that will entertain people for decades. None of those things.
Yeah. How you literally transcend the human form and learn things from the font of creation that no one has ever even touched.
You'll find the secret truth behind every corner and witness the universe at its most beautiful, that kind of things. Yeah, no.
We're not saying that you will become like onto a god.
No, that's not what we're saying. No. When we're saying normalization and more people trying them, it's not actually about like, hey, go try the illegal drug. It's not that. It's about like people are going to try illegal drugs. And one thing that is important is genuinely to get like more people to understand risks, information, things they need to know.
And one thing I would like to add, and just a trap I would like us to avoid, is a form of psychedelic exceptionalism, where, and this is a term my comrades over at the publication Symposia use quite a bit, where they talk about how people tend to treat psychedelics as unique among drugs, as somehow categorically only good, no bad effects, where every other drug is something to be considered outside of the realm of, and psychedelics are not to be considered drugs. They're they're sacred medicine, or other terms that absolutely psychedelics are sacred medicine in many cultures, but like they are also drugs. I don't think you can divorce them from the context of drugs and drug policy.
No, there's not really any meaning to do that either, because they do what the definition of the word drugs does. It alters your state of consciousness.
But also, if you're going to talk about addiction, or you're going to talk about unhealthy behaviors in society, like I would go the other way and point to more things that also can be extremely harmful to people. For example, gambling is one that, it's really worthwhile to think about. gambling and the ways that, like, for example, kids games is something I touch on a lot. Obviously, people who watch like James Stephanie Sterling are very aware of. There are lots of harmful things that people who are in a bad place should avoid, and people with certain tendencies to get harmed by that sort of thing should avoid, right?
Right.
Yes.
I think that's a kind of a good place to start, generally speaking, in terms of like the benefits of psychedelics. There's been a lot of research that's gone into how sort of exposure to psychedelics has not necessarily cured people of addiction, because I don't think it exactly does that. It doesn't like straight up change your brain, but it just changes the way in which people think about substances that they're addicted to, or potentially behaviors that they're addicted to. I could talk from personal experience, because again, as we've all said, don't actually go out and do drugs. But if you're going to do drugs, this is the kind of thing, that is going to happen. This is something I've done in the past. I'll never do it again, I promise. But upon sort of like taking about 3 dried grams of psilocybin mushrooms in the age of phones, realized just how sort of dangerous, not dangerous, but just how sort of toxic my relationship was with my phone.
Right.
For example, it's just something that you end up sort of thinking about when you're under the influence of psychedelic, substances and stuff like that. It's just sort of like, it's weird, the reflex to pick up my phone and check it and be like, who's talking to me, what's going on, etc., 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 just wasn't there anymore. In fact, if anything, it was the opposite. It was like, this is bad for you. And it's hard to kind of say what was communicating that to me, whether it was just like my own head or something else. I don't fucking know. But
yeah, I think there's definitely an effect where it feels like you get to talk to a kind of inner self, right? A kind of a person who's very down to earth and knows what you need and tells you things straightforwardly. That kind of effect can happen.
Yeah, totally. It's like you're talking to a version of yourself that knows you better than you know you. Yeah.
I certainly, I certainly know a few trans people who talk to me about it making their problems with dysphoria lessen. That's not a thing where I'm trying to say it will do that,
right,
for people. I'm trying to talk about the topic in general, I guess, of kind of like people talk about being able to, I guess, work through various kinds of problems.
I think to just kind of nip this in the bud, none of us can predict what a psychedelic will do to you.
Correct.
Like anything we say, we're speaking in generalities, because psychedelics are what's called non-specific amplifiers. I believe that's the term.
Right.
Where whatever you bring with you into the experience, you just get more of.
It's the cave.
Correct.
It's the cave on Dagobah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like there's that sort of common thing that people say all the time, sort of experienced psychedelics users and stuff like that will always say that thing, set and setting, in terms of you should not be getting high on these substances or on these on these plants if you are really having a bad time,
right?
And
people say about drink,
right?
Just like, don't drink because you're sad, drink because you're happy and have a fun time with people. Don't
yeah, and it's kind of like I've had this sort of expanded in my understanding of it all over the years of my past very, very bad and naughty and definitely illegal that you shouldn't do and I will never do again psychedelic use. It's sort of grown into the idea that like you cannot use psychedelics specifically. I'm not entirely certain about drink. I'm not really the expert on that, although I've done a lot of drinking. You can't really use these substances or these plants with a mindset of I'm going to escape from anything. Yeah. People talk about having a bad trip, and it's not ever really a bad trip per se, because there's not really you could say, oh, I've come out of that trip having a fantastic experience and I've learned a lot about myself and I feel very good. My empathy, my inhibitions have been unlocked. This is all really, really good stuff. But at the same time, I don't think you could sit there and be like, that was a great escape. I don't ever think that I've ever had a trip where I've not had something go, yo, that's fucking weird. You know, and right? And something like really sort of grabs you and goes, okay, that's fucked up, and I'm thinking about that a bit too much, and you try and distract yourself, and it's kind of easy to get distracted on psychedelics, so you do kind of just do that, and then you end up having a good time anyway. But I think that's the whole crux of set versus setting, because it's like, again, I mean, that's really cool, non-specific amplifiers. That's makes a lot of fucking sense, because there is no guarantee on what will be amplified in your experience. You will just have something amplified, whether it's incredibly good things that have been buried inside you for a long time and you've not realized, or absolutely horrific things that you definitely should have had therapy for, but of course you might not have had access to that because of socioeconomic factors.
Yeah, I think from an experiential point of view, it at the very least feels like it speeds up a lot of processing, and you can find yourself in a state where it's like, I had all this bad stuff that was kind of hanging around here, and I didn't have any way to, or I was just dealing with it in a little trickle, right? And it would be like a little bit of this every day for 6 months or something. And it's like, you know, what someone might call a bad trip is in fact like this big thing that was hanging over me, a conflict with my sister or whatever, right? Has pushed through in one go. And in some senses, it's a bad experience, but it's also like a processing experience. And if you're prepared for it, it can be good. And that, again, is the point of educating people about psychedelics, because if people are going to try it, right, like they need to know that what people call a bad trip isn't necessarily like everyone turns to demons and tries to kill you and then you end up traumatized for the rest of your life. Well, unless you aren't prepared unless you have no idea what's going in, like then you could have a genuinely harmful time for you.
I think even the terminology is kind of problematic, because it implies that a trip can be like neatly divided into good or bad.
Yes.
Because like the worst experience, or I should say the most difficult experience I've ever had on psychedelics is like, still I had fun at other points on that trip. Like,
yeah,
right.
But like, if you part of the reason that bad trips can be so damaging to people is because of this idea that once it starts happening, you are trapped in that. And that now it's a bad trip and you're experiencing a bad trip, and you just have to wait it out. And a lot of the times, like, no, you like, it's your mind, right? You can kind of come to the other side of it, but you might not if you think you can't.
Right, exactly. Yeah. I think that's where it's so important in terms of education of people who are going to use these substances to explain about the, you know, if you're gonna tell yourself that this is bad, guess what? It's going to be bad. And I think a lot of that can kind of relate to, you know, talking about things like the doom pill and stuff like that in, you know, if we're going to talk about politics and how to kind of relate it to that kind of thing.
Right.
It kind of shows how powerful our minds can be. And I guess, I mean, again,
for yourself.
Right, yeah. I guess.
Look at this guy. He's got more than one brain cell.
Powerful brain over here. Must be nice.
Hey, listen, just because it's powerful doesn't mean it's good or smart. You know, I think, I don't know how psychedelics affect your brain. I'm not a brain scientist. Like I said, powerful brain, not necessarily smart. But it kind of feels like it just releases a lot of barriers. There's a lot of barriers that stop us from thinking about certain things. Like, our brains are pretty fucking smart in that regard.
There's a specific pathway in the brain that's turned off. The default modal network, I think it's called. Any terminology I'm using is like half remembered. So
Okay.
Please Google it on
I'm
your own.
I'm going to Google it right now. What did you say?
Default modal network?
Default modal network. Yeah.
But basically, the analogy I've heard is that it's like a ski slope, where your brain makes pathways between neurons, And each time you connect those pathways, each time you think one thing in connection to another, it reinforces that connection. Like a ski slope. The more people go down a ski slope in one way, the more there's one groove that people go down. What psychedelics do is they kind of temporarily turn that off, so your brain makes new connections that it might not have made. So it's very much like how your brain was when you were a child, which is why people report that psychedelics kind of bring them back to a state of childhood. It's because it kind of does that.
That's incredibly interesting, because I would say that is like the number one feeling that psychedelics brings about for me, is like this is what it felt like to be a baby, or like what it felt like to be a young child.
Everything is new again. I'm seeing things for the first time.
Yeah, totally. Like, I remember someone pointing out, like, when something goes very wrong in the brain, like a stroke, like the way that object permanence can dissolve, and so you lose the barriers between things, and like it's hard to even identify any object, let alone like make the connotations to it that you have in your brain. And that's basically how babies see the world when they're first born. And I guess, to some degree, some of the literal hallucinogenic effects can be a little bit like that. Like it's a little like the textures on things blend together and start to become really runny.
Oh yeah. That shit's cool as fuck.
I always feel like I'm, and to a degree this is true, because certain psychedelics actually do increase like your ability to see.
Yes.
Like a little bit, because your eyes dilate, so you're taking in more light. But like it is like, like everything just feels like, oh, the TV switched to high definition for the first time in like years. Yeah,
it's very Wizard of Oz. Yeah, absolutely.
Oh yeah, sure. It goes from like black and white to color.
Yeah.
I
think another thing is like the idea of a distinction between weed and mushrooms, acid, like psychedelics, might be worth kind of exploring. That isn't necessarily, I don't know, I at least feel, and this is just like, I'm using the word feel and emphasizing it because I'm not saying this based on a lot of science, but like that marijuana can have a lot of the same effects, at least 100%. In large quantities, as shrooms or something.
Sure,
and that like that shrooms might do a just the same thing in a way more potent way, and therefore it massively oversimplifying, but if it's the same road, right, you need to like smoke this much weed to get only this far, and you'll probably fall asleep because you'll be really, really baked. And then by contrast, if you have a few grams of shrooms, you could get right to the end of the road.
I would say that like the difference for me in terms of those two states of being like way too high on pot, like uncomfortably, I just ate an edible and what have I done? And now I'm going to invent Bobby Duke, and tripping is that there's a feeling while tripping that you are in control. I'm thinking I am sober while being high.
Yeah.
Right.
Whereas when you are on a lot of pot, you're very much like at the mercy of your brain.
I was about to say that. I was about to say that. Like, I had my first ever panic attack when I was stoned as fuck, watching The Mighty Boosh when I was about 19 years old.
Oh.
Yeah, it was not
panic
good.
attacks while high are such a fucking bad time. Especially if you're having the weird kind of time dilation thing where you're sort of like popping in and out of states and you're like, I'm panicking, and you're in the other state where you're like, I know that I'm having a panic attack, but I don't feel panicky right now. I'd like to end that panic attack, but like, I'm back to the panicking again.
Yeah,
it's
I'm
panic
panicking.
time.
It can't. And this is why I can see where you're coming from with making the connection between weed and psychedelics, because it does kind of feel like, oh my god, I'm trapped forever, kind of thing. Like I'm never gonna be out of this kind of thing. But I think that is just like, something that I think that's maybe our susceptibility.
I think that's the most common, like that's the singular most common thing that can make you freak out if you are tripping, and therefore the idea of a bad trip is one of the most dangerous things, because like if you have this idea that I could have a bad trip, exactly like Mildred said just before, like we don't like you don't have a trip where it's just all a bad scary experience. But if you have this idea that could happen, then that could, much more likely
Definitely.
happen because you're having a bad time and thinking, I'll never stop having a bad time. Like
people treat it like Russian roulette.
Yeah.
Where you're kind of spinning the dice, and if it lands bad, then it's like, oh, well, now I just got to put up with this until it's over.
Yeah, that is
exactly. And whereas actually it's like you could just be like weeping and crying, processing this big thing 1 minute, and you could be terrified another minute, then you could just be laughing your ass off and then just like mellow and watching a movie. Like it could just, you go all over the place.
One thing that I've said to my peeps in the chat a few times when we talk about psychedelics is my experience in the Lovecraft realm. I literally like did so many shrooms that I thought I was in a realm of flesh and teeth and guts and just like horrific animals that were like sort of surrounding me, and some of them were like vast, and I just can't, whatever, you can't explain it properly, but like it was just incredibly bizarre and horrific. And the thing that happened is now these were closed eye visuals, by the way. I think that's another thing to specify as well, is that a lot of the time when you see shrooms or LSD portrayed in media, they will be like, oh my God, your entire world changes and it's fucked. And it's not like that. Things will be like a bit runny. Like we were saying before.
There's a fear that it's going to be like VR and you could just like walk into the road and get hit by a car because you think you're in Candyland. And it's like, no, you're not really likely to have like open eye. You think you're in another place.
Right.
Like you were saying, like closed eye, you could probably like, basically have a dream, but you're awake.
That's it.
And it's very vivid and very cool.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's it.
It also, there's a certain blurring of the line between imagination and reality where you can know something is not real, but still be experiencing it. Like, I had a similar experience to you in the Lovecraft dimension, as you put it. I just called it hell when I went. But I was like, I knew it wasn't happening on some level.
Same.
But at the same time, I felt like I was experiencing that happening to me. There was this other being who was taunting me, and I would kind of get up in her face and like laugh at her and be like, you can't kill me. Like, you can't destroy me. Everything you're doing to torment me means nothing. And she would like send me into like the depths, and like I would, face like the worst stuff inside me, and then I would come back and I'd be like, hey, I'm fine. What are you gonna do, bitch?
That's so dope.
And so like that felt horrible at the time. Like I was bawling but like I came away with such a feeling of empowerment of like I walked into hell and like spat in the devil's face.
That's a really good example of what it can be like a bad time, and then you're just like, I can do that. I can do anything. Like feeling like you're gonna spin off the earth because you can feel its movement, and then just being like, yeah, I'm fine. I'm walking around on the earth. It's
literally
okay. I could handle walking around on the earth when I could feel it spinning. I can feel it, I can handle it. I can handle anything now. Someone said, are you aware that what you're seeing is a hallucination? And I think a good example would be like looking at someone's face. This is a thing that happened, again, as Mule says, thing that happened a long time ago. Promise never do it again. Where like, it's like the textures are running. Like on a video game, textures on a 3D model, it's like they're all sliding off and blending into each other. And like, one thing that happened, I looked at someone's face and it was like their face sort of ran and went across to the side of it. And so like their eyes did like this, and they had another one. And I just very casually, because I did totally know it was a hallucination and totally knew it was just a thing I was just seeing because of the shrooms. I was just like, oh, you got 3 eyes. Like that literally was how I said it. I was just like, got 3 eyes. And they were like, that's kind of funny. It's just,
And it is like that baby brain thing as well, like because of the way.
One thing I would caution you though, there's a difference between hallucination and delusion, and you can absolutely have delusions on hallucinogenic drugs. And if anyone tells you otherwise, that is dangerous.
Yeah, that's like, worth knowing. Yeah.
I was gonna say when you said, "Oh, you won't run into the road and get hit by a car because you think you're somewhere else, but you might run into the road and get hit by a car because you're like, this will not hurt me because I'm an ascended person,
I have to run because my friends are out to get me.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And they're chasing me because I'm running naked into the street.
Right.
Because
Which
they
is,
want
again,
they want to hurt me.
Yeah.
Setting. It's why it's important to create a good, safe space for you to do it in.
Yeah.
And again, it's just important to educate people on this stuff and why it, you need to make a safe environment so that you don't have anything like that happen or do anything harmful to yourself or others.
Yeah. And it's also kind of like just really, really important in terms of like I remember when you were saying, holy fucking shit, like I just can't like why the fuck would anyone take shrooms and just like not be a communist? Like that was one of the best things that you ever said to me.
I said a few things. I think one thing that's interesting is like I think that people have a common idea that anyone who trips and they used to think the same thing about weed because again it's a very similar kind of mentality, is that like anyone who tries these drugs will become more empathetic and more communist leaning. And there are studies towards that, but I think that it's important to note that there might be a mix up there between like, if we can get the shitty conservative people to smoke weed, they will become communists, versus when they are currently high, they'll be more loving and want the world to be a nice place. I think like the way you feel when you're high is incredibly like can be incredibly empathetic and loving and wanting to share everything with everyone. And if everyone were high,
yes,
then they might all be communists, but not in the long, like not having tripped one time would solve everything. I think that communism, to some degree, anarchism to a way bigger degree, is to do with a society of mass vulnerability. Right. And so that's what like an insight that I think that you can get from tripping, from weed, from psychotropic drugs is the experience of having your brain just turn to mush and be like, I'm a baby and I need to be taken care of, and I can like feed myself, but that's like about all I can handle. But I feel good and it's chill.
That when I'm tripping, to be honest.
Sure. But like but it's good and it's chill. And if people were like this, we'd all be having a chill, good time. Yeah. And that's that kind of insight that actually like we need to be able to be more vulnerable with each other. Like people in the world, like we need a society where everyone feels good to trust one another. Yes. So again, I don't think everyone will try mushrooms one time and become a commie.
I also there's a state that people who take very high levels of psychedelic drugs report called non-duality, or it's often called ego death, where you kind of dissolve as a being and become one with a totality that is the sum total of all that exists, an unchanging, perfect, indivisible oneness.
There's no you, because there's no you versus anything else. You're just
you are just one facet of the universe. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people will experience that and think, oh, well, how could anyone, if they believe they are all part of the same whole, then turn around and treat other people cruelly?
Right.
But by the same token, that's pretty close to what a lot of religions believe, and I don't think anyone's under the illusion that if everybody had a religion, there would be no war. Like,
right. Correct. You can totally you can definitely point to, like, if you understand some ideas, that it can enhance them, it can help you get insights and help you understand that perspective better. It doesn't mean that like mushrooms are just like the commie pill, like magic bullet. It's
that's
like,
estrogen.
Yeah, absolutely, that's right. You start growing the cat ears after month 2. But I think so. That was the other thing that I realized the other day, that like I think if I were to put a name to the political leanings, I think that it can have like a kind of the effect, I think, is like it can dissolve everything and then recrystallize everything. Your brain's gonna like mush up because you're able to make these new connections, and then when you're done, you'll have those new connections, so they'll be solid. And so for a lot of people, I think that it can increase a libertarian leaning, but as Mildred already said, like, it can also be, you could also find religion, you could also completely devote yourself to, I mean, literally, like, cults and stuff have used drugs.
Charles Manson.
Yeah, time.
That's right,
since time immemorial, to just bomb people's brains into submission. But
sorry, go ahead.
Well, so I think that because you were saying about, like, how could anyone come back and then treat people cruelly, and it's like it's kind of funny how like the Californian ideology, right? The whole thing with Silicon Valley tech bros dropping acid, because it was a time when there was this huge cultural movement to drop out from stuff, to try drugs, to just, like, to expand your horizons in that sense, that was driven by a bunch of, like, growing leftist culture in America that was genuinely cool. And then there was, like, a cultural wrapper around it that kind of is all that we kind of see or remember nowadays. And then right on the periphery of that were these entrepreneurs, and they were like, yeah, I'll engage with this stuff. I'm having such a deep experience. And what they got from it was, like, was the thing that is described as the Californian ideology, that I think is best summed up by this kind of, like, anarcho-capitalist perspective that is actually just that they want to be on top of the monopoly. They believe that they could be the benevolent philosopher king who rules the world, while espousing libertarian ideals the whole time.
I would
Elon
also
Musk.
say
It's Elon Musk, basically.
I would also say that, like, the experience of psychedelics, one of the things that it does is it makes it very difficult to treat anything seriously, or to treat anything with pomp, or kind of a lot of to do about it, to see the grandeur of that.
Yes.
And that meshes very well with, like, the new breed of internet fascist we have nowadays, where it's not really about believing something so much as it is about rejecting a perceived pomposity.
I think
the other.
Yeah. I think the alt-right are if we were to define it as a historical moment, I said this to Ian Danskin one time, he was underimpressed, is that the alt-right could be defined by being far-right children of liberals. Like, specifically, that's the specific historical moment. It's that we have this idea of conservatives inheriting conservative ideals, and the alt-right were a bunch of children of liberals who went online and got radicalized, specifically.
Right. Yeah.
And because of that, it is a really immature ideology. It's literally like, don't tell me what to do, mom, but in a very literal sense, because a bunch of these guys have a mom who is a liberal, and they're trying to reject that.
I would.
Her name is Anita Sarkeesian.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
I would definitely compound what Mildred said, because that is when I've done really high doses of psilocybin, that is kind of the main thing, because I think that I think I can't really speak for LSD because I've only ever done it once, but I think definitely when it comes to psilocybin, I think that the main thing that it does is tell us, holy fucking shit, you are thinking about this. Like, this is the thing that you are stressing out about a lot now. And also, there's these other things in your life that you could maybe look at. But, like, look at this, and we're going to sort of amplify it again, as you say, the non-specific amplification. And what kind of tends to happen, obviously, when I've done it in the past, is like, oh, you're worrying too much about politics. And these fucking, these fucking little cheeky little shits that, grow in the fucking ground, and also, whatever, are just there being like, hey, you know what? Just don't worry about it. It's all fine. One of the huge messages that I got on a big trip that I had once was like, there's more that connects us than divides us. There's more that connects us than divides us. And I remember this phrase getting repeated again and again and again in my head. And I was like, yeah, this is sick. Like, this is so empathetic. Like, it's true. Like, we're all humans. Like, oh my God. But that can just turn you into Joe fucking Rogan. You know what I mean? Where it's just, have these ideas of like, oh, these people, everyone's really nice. But then eventually you just don't care enough, because nothing actually matters, and it's all going to be fine in the end. these kind of notions, you know, which are kind of healthy in some regard.
I think a discussion that I would like to have in this stream is about the pathways through which we might see psychedelic legalization and where we might want to oppose something, actually. Because weed is legal in a lot of places now. Because of that, it's getting normalized.
I gotta go.
I gotta get some weed.
And it's getting normalized, and because of that, and because capitalism is the hegemonic, ideology and mode of production in the world, that means that weed is getting meshed in with capitalism. There are people. We saw this thing that was like going to a weed cafe as a work outing instead of going drinking, and someone who had never smoked weed before smoking weed for the first time in the presence of their boss. Right? What a yeah, that's the face. That's exactly
right
it.
Face.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Right? Like that's exactly it. And I think it's like we might want to question how capitalism can and will attempt to bring psychedelics into the fold as a thing that meshes with the workforce, because the history of this in drugs is just like we would love to think that everyone will try shrooms one time and be like, fuck all this, I'm not doing this, see ya. But so the history of drug criminalization has so much to do with capitalism. It has so much to do with productivity, right? So cocaine, for example, was given to slaves in plantations in America, and then when freed slaves with cocaine addictions wanted cocaine or wanted to enjoy cocaine recreationally as well as just having their addiction, that was when it started to become illegal. Alex Vital covers a lot of this in The End of Policing.
And not to mention also that like cocaine is derived from coca, which has a long history of indigenous use.
Yeah.
And two things I just want to touch on there to expand on your point, Sophie. Number one, this process is well underway. This isn't something we have to worry about in the future. There are right now publicly traded companies you can buy stock in that manufacture psilocybin mushrooms.
That makes sense.
I sometimes get YouTube ads because I watch a lot of psychedelic content, and one of the things that I get served ads for is fucking Kevin O'Leary from Dragon's Den. If you don't know him, he's basically Canada's Donald Trump. He, in fact, tried to run as head of our Conservative Party, but got laughed out of town because he's Canada's not yet at America's level of we don't give a shit fascism. We'll get there, don't worry. But where he's encouraging you to buy stock in a psilocybin company,
right?
And another thing that I just before we go any further, I just want to acknowledge is that like the entire history of shroom usage as we know it in the West is based on an act of theft, on an act of cultural theft, where Maria Sabina was she showed some tourists basically a ceremony where they used psilocybin mushrooms, and they basically ruined her life for it. They made her an outcast in her community and fucking destroyed this ceremonial thing, and she died regretting it. She said that the mushrooms no longer work because Westerners ruined it.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that like doesn't get like discussed, is that like yeah.
Well, it definitely is really important to sort of look at how indigenous cultures basically.
Yeah, we've got Tale of Two Rabbit there in chat.
Yes.
Tale of Two Rabbits in I believe Canadian, I believe First Nations Canadian heritage. I don't know I'm sorry if I've got that wrong. But they're very cool. They actually advised me on the Rolling with Rainbows podcast for writing in some Native American stuff in the Narragansett setting. And they said, in some ways, the historical precedent to me for pot legalization feels like the commodification of tobacco. That's actually a really interesting one that Robert Evans talks about in a brief history of vice, that like a lot of people don't know as much anymore, that tobacco was a plant that when smoked in large quantities would like bake you out, like leave you baked like weed. And what we have now is like just such a weak garbage version. And a lot of that has to do with exactly the thing I was talking about just before, that to do with productivity, to do with the idea that like people were into it, but it was making them lay about having fun. And so the companies deliberately diluted it down, as well as just the capitalistic race to the bottom. Just deliberately, obviously, the less of the actual active ingredient that you put in something that is the most expensive part, and the more you just fill it with rat poison, then like the larger your profit margins. In a similar way.
What a cool economy! Also,
I know, isn't it great?
It's the best system.
Just good, yeah. In a similar way, like. Chinese opium dens in the US were, considered completely fine because it was Chinese laborers who were going there. And this is falling on obviously from like the British opium wars and like forcing a whole bunch of opium addiction and forcing opium trade with China. And so it was considered completely fine. But then white women started going to the opium dens. And that's when opium became illegal in the US. Like there's this exactly like one-for-one history that has to do with the people that capitalism considers to be valuable, be it the workforce, be it the reproductive labor force, right? And when drugs are interfering with the way that they do the thing capitalism wants, is when they become illegal. It has nothing to do with public health.
Right.
Just like literally nothing to do with public health.
Links in
I would say the other time when it would become illegal is if it can be used to over police a minority group. Which is, I think the case with cannabis.
100%. I think that's definitely a side of it. I think that I don't know. I think that is an obvious dynamic that is at play the whole time. And for example, like cocaine, which is illegal, like something is illegal insofar as police are policing it. So like here in London, if you're in South London at a rave in a black neighborhood, the odds that you are going to get arrested for having cocaine compared to the guys who are at the stock trades at Canary Wharf, the idea like who are also taking a bunch of cocaine, but they're doing it in their job, in their office, in broad daylight, like, but it's for the stock market. They're never going to get arrested. And if you're doing it in, for fun in a black neighborhood, then you are.
And now our government is making
the exact
it so
reverse policy. How it should be.
Right. Our government is now making it so that if you do get caught with cocaine as well, they can just take your passport off you. So
it's fun. Really, really fucked.
Yeah.
Because British politics, they only know how to have referendum or ban thing. Those are the only two things. Those are the only two policies. Right. I think there's this history that has a lot of interplay with capitalism, and I think we should consider that a lot of the neoliberal capitalism does a lot of like incentivizing people to think of themselves as entrepreneurs, think of themselves as upwardly socially mobile, even if that isn't actually the case. And along with that, there's so much of giving the workforce in the middle class, basically, different skills, different experiences, different access to different things, provided they have the money. And I think that, that's something that we can really worry about with psychedelics, like Mildred was already saying, with the public, a publicly trading company already doing it. I think that what we'll see is it feeding into the idea of creativity. You'll have people who are working in a marketing agency and the creative department are like, let's go to let's do a shroom weekend as a fun team building exercise. And then once we're done, we'll use it to figure out how to sell toilet cleaner.
Well, it depends. I think it depends how well that's going to go, because one of my recurring thoughts that I've ever had when I've done a lot of shrooms in one go is just quit your job. It just happens so regularly that I'm not sure how beneficial that will be. I could certainly see it maybe being a thing. But I think it's more likely that what Mildred has already touched on in your video, which was it was basically your video about psychedelics. I think you've only done one, haven't you?
I've done two.
You've done two. Well, there was one where you spoke about microdosing and how that is sort of being now sort of made into, like, they're sort of packaging it as a depression, sort of like, you know, what do they call it? Antidepressant. It's an antidepressant.
Yeah.
They're saying, like,
well,
yeah.
Microdosing is largely nonsense.
Yeah.
There's no real evidence that it works, and most like peer-reviewed studies into it, like, say it's negligible, and just a placebo. But the danger there, I think, is in the medicalization of psychedelics, in a way where if you've ever read Michael Pollan's book, the name of which escapes me, he's a big proponent of this, where the way that psychedelics are to be used is you go into a doctor's office and you sit down with an expert who helps you interpret the experience. Right. And I think that is how capital will recuperate psychedelics, because what they will do is they'll make sure you have someone with you who can, you don't get any weird or dangerous ideas, you know.
Right, a licensed, approved professional. Yeah. No, I mean, America is already trying to, and again, this links back to my point about how it interfaces with capitalism. America is already trying to upsell therapy patients on ketamine. A friend of mine, whenever she goes to get her prescription refilled for ADHD meds, God, what a cool system America has for healthcare. Every time she goes to get her ADHD meds refilled, she has to get a private appointment with her therapist to do that. And then when she's doing that, every time they ask her if she's interested in ketamine immersion therapy. And
I mean, that part does sound cool to me, though. Like, I mean, not that I think it should be forced on people, but like, I would love it if when I went to the doctor, like, hey, now that you're here, would you also like some ketamine?
But it's exactly what you're describing, where they would be giving it to you in a controlled environment and then talking you through it as a therapeutic experience.
Yeah, and I think that's definitely insidious, but obviously I'd still do it.
Well, listen, we're all big brain smarties, so we're not going to listen to any nerds in white coats tell us what our experiences were. We can just sit there and be like, yeah, sure, it definitely meant I should go back to work and do stuff. Yeah, you're right.
I have an alpha brain like Joe Rogan, so I will draw my own conclusions. Yeah. Yeah, no, I think maybe you're right about that. Maybe it will be much more of a like.
I hope that was clear. That I actually don't think that's good. I was joking that I want the ketamine.
Well, ketamine has definitely been proven to work for in exchange of anesthetics, which is good. Apparently,
the treatment is to do with it as a depression.
Exactly,
cure,
which is bad.
Which there are much better, more viable alternatives that won't leave you needing a catheter at 35,
which a lot of my friends have.
Yeah. Right, literally, yeah. So, but I think Mildred's right. Like, I think the idea of it being shrooms, psychedelics being a prescribed experience, not just a prescribed medication, but a prescribed experience with the professional there with you. I mean, there's a history of that. I mean, that was also a thing that they tried to push forward. It was very prevalent in the American middle class in like the 60s and 70s, was them trying to push, like, can we give patients acid and then walk through their therapy while they're tripping.
And I will say that approach is not without its merits. I think that as fucking ludicrously rife for abuse as it is, there are definitely applications of that type of method where what I specifically take issue with is that is the only legitimate use of psychedelics.
Right.
I don't have a problem with people having the option to, like, with a licensed therapist, take psychedelics and like be walked through it. What I take issue with,
for the purposes of their health. Yeah. Like
What I take issue with is that it has to be mediated through that authority. That is what I think is the dangerous part. Because, like, there are plenty of studies that show like that will help, like specifically patients who are dying. That will help them overcome the anxiety they feel about dying. Like that is just a stone cold fact. It's been well documented at this point.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah, it's super fucking awesome. It literally is just like it's people sort of like coming to terms with it as well. So it isn't just like oh, I'm no longer scared. It's sort of like being able to think clearly about it, and therefore being able to, you know, literally organize things that they may not have been able to organize before and stuff. You know what I mean? Like speak with their families and be like, okay, here's what I want. You know, because the last thing that you want is the state sort of like deciding what to do with your stuff when you die, you know? So there's so many positive benefits to that as well. I think definitely like thinking about how you know, because in terms of weed, like we mentioned weed before, in the way that sort of these things get commodified, it's kind of how like now weed is just like luminous green. You just get luminous green weed. And I don't know if I'm the oldest here or who's old, I don't really care. But when I was like the 13, 14, the weed that we used to get, you could still get super green weed, but more often than not, you would just get like brown sticks and seeds and shit. Like you get Thai stick or just like Jamaican bushweed and stuff like that.
Yeah, Conrad was telling me a lot about 80s and 90s weed where it was just entirely sticks and seeds. Yeah.
And you can, that stuff like is nothing, absolutely nothing compared to like super silver haze mango extract flavor 2 times, you know?
I will say though, that while that's definitely true, I don't know if it says it, the thing that people always say about that is like, oh, we came in and we like GMO'd these weed strains and now they're like so much more powerful than they ever were, which is, and it's true that if you smoke weed today, it's way more powerful than it was in the 80s. What I don't think is true though is that it's more powerful than it has been historically.
Sure.
Because I think that the reason it was actually artificially weaker in the 80s is, and during the entire war on drugs, up until the legalization of cannabis, because the war on drugs is still ongoing, obviously, is because you're just getting it from black market sources who don't necessarily, they don't have like big grow up operations.
Right.
And I think that there's this tendency to assume that like, now we came in and now we figured out with all the science how to make it better. Like, no, I think that probably the indigenous societies that have been growing pot for thousands of years, they probably know how to make pretty strong weed. I that would be my guess.
Okay.
I'm not a botanist, but I bet if you
I'm with you on that. Yeah.
That's
the thing
enough.
about sticks and seeds, I think, is that it's not about, you know, it's like by the gram, right? If you're just like packaging what you can, like
you'd want to fill it with sticks and seeds because it's heavier.
Bulking up the
exactly.
bag.
Exactly.
Yeah. 100%. No. Yeah, I was literally coming at it from the way that you pointed out, Mildred. I was literally about to say that.
Maybe you're right. I don't know.
No. Well, this is the thing. It's good to hear a different sort of take on it, because it's kind of like, because the main reason that I talk about it is because in my sort of history of use with weed, it's like it's always been way too strong. And then in terms of taking CBD flower, where obviously the weed is not THC heavy, it's CBD heavy, and you can get sort of like CBD flower now that has no THC in it apparently, and that can like balance out the high kind of thing. And the CBD, as far as I'm aware, is sort of associated with antipsychotic qualities and stuff like that. So in terms of medicinal use, it might be more beneficial for some people to have the CBD heavier strains and stuff like that rather than THC. Obviously THC is great for things like, and I'm not a doctor, I'm not a weed doctor, but I think pain management and in some forms it's good against anxiety, but in some forms it's not. So yeah, that's the kind of place that I was coming from with it, in terms of like, could it be used for more medical applications with that in mind? And and has the commodification of it kind of ruined that.
But we are here to talk about shrooms and acid.
That's true. Yeah.
I just remembered something that I said to a friend, which I think might be helpful, which I forgot to say earlier when we were talking about the different experiences that you have when you're tripping. We were talking about closed eye versus open eye hallucinations versus delusions. And a friend who had recently tried mushrooms said to me that they didn't hallucinate, and they thought that was going to be the thing because that's the kind of thing that gets talked about. And I said, and I think this is, I'm happy with how I said this. I think it's a good way to put it. Like, the graphics go in the trailer, but they're not why you play the game. Like,
yes.
It's not about like seeing a little funny cartoon guy appear who isn't there. That's not what it's about. It's about like incredible feelings of emotional honesty and like, your brain being like a baby's, and you can explore new things and everything's new to you, and crystallizing new ideas in your brain and having a different perspective, and and then sometimes things get squiggly in your vision, and that's cool too. Like that's another thing that's also cool. And I think that's maybe. Yeah,
that's so true, because that is the thing that I think people that don't do a lot of psychedelics are very preoccupied with is the visuals.
Yeah, totally.
And it is more, you will really experience more of those visuals if you're in a sort of closed eye scenario. Like, I used to like to sit there and meditate, and
that's nice. Yeah,
that is where the Lovecraft realm came from, and it's where many other realms come from as well, kind of thing. Like you said, Mildred, you went sort of from like this place where someone was taunting you, and then this person this being sent you into hell, and then you came back. It is kind of like a weird. Well, that's why they call it a trip, isn't it? Yeah, and these closed eye visuals, I guess, can have the positive mental effects that we're talking about. They can aid in that, I guess, because maybe it's sort of like, so being
able to visualize what's going on in your brain can certainly be cool. Like
the when I was talking about my Lovecraft realm experience, it was sort of like I'd look down at my body because I was lying down, and I saw all these gross little tentacle things just sort of approach my body very slowly, and I was like, yeah, they're gonna eat me. That's definitely going to happen. And then it did happen, which, maybe that was a self-fulfilling prophecy. I don't know. But it didn't feel, again, scary because I knew what was happening and I knew what was going on. And it felt like they left behind my soul, right? Or like maybe they ate all the bad stuff. So it was kind of like, it just felt like a very sort of cleansing thing. And it was like reinforcing that like this experience that you're having is good, actually. And you're going to come out this good. And that can be applied to like a lot of things in life as well. Like maybe it's good to have that reinforcement in your mind. If you go through a bunch of weird shit and horrible shit, you're going to come through maybe a better person.
Maybe this is a general topic that could be where the discussion goes, but like I think one way to understand the relationship to hallucinations on psychedelics is that human beings are imaginative creatures. Like what I think maybe defines our species is us as storytellers, and appreciative of like a story, theme, meaning in story, and this kind of experience. This is, I think, for me, this is a tangent. I'll try and be concise. In A Brief History of Vice, Robert Evans talks about how there's a popular theory that music, like what we hear as being musical notes, has to do with resonant frequencies that match the frequencies that our brainwaves are, which does actually make sense if you think a whole engineering thing that I'm not going to get into, but that I think separates music for me out from other kinds of art, where actually like other kinds of art are trying to convey meaning a lot of the time through narrative, whereas things that don't convey narrative, for example, like expressionism, like differs from narrative paintings, whether there's a character or whatever, because I think what we really love is that kind of narrative, as opposed, like there's narrative and there's experience, and I think that the hallucinations can be this extra bit on top that helps you to perceive what's all going on as a narrative, or as characters, or as an experience, or as a place and a time and people and a conversation and all this sort of stuff. Like literally tripping and going up and looking at yourself in the mirror and just being like, hey, this, like, you know, these feelings that you're feeling, you don't need to anymore. Like, you know, and perceiving yourself anew and that kind of stuff. And you know, that can be, that's how the experience is in general without any hallucinations. But then, like, you can be, like you're saying, right, you can have what is a clear story to your mind where things come and eat away all the bad stuff and it's gone. I think that I studied electronic engineering. I'm inclined to think of the human brain like a computer, even though it's a very flawed allegory. And I think that shrooms kind of give you more RAM. Like there's a bit more space for thinking.
Yeah.
And I think that does map to the idea that you can create new connections, which you usually can't do as an adult when you're on shrooms. You have a bit of galaxy brain. You're just a little bit like big bulging brain going on.
Yeah. It's interesting because the analogy I've always used is it's like defragging. Where for a little while after, even, you have this feeling of like, oh, I can make these connections a little bit easier.
That's what I was talking about with processing before. I think that it's like defragging is a thing you'd like to do all the time, but you don't necessarily have the space to do it in your brain. And both the experience of taking time to yourself, that's the just basic self-care of having some time where you're just zoned out because you're too high to do any work, but also what it actually does to your brain as well helps you process that stuff. I definitely think about defragging as well. That's like one that comes up when I think about it a lot. Yeah. But I think
for like a week after a psychedelic trip, I will usually feel like someone has just come to my brain and went and blown out like all the cobwebs. And
I don't know if you
like, oh yeah, I think
this,
I can.
Mildred or Sophie, but I've told Sophie this before. Psychedelics cured my OCD for a good 4 weeks after I did it. Like, I would have like incredibly severe OCD where I would have to check the oven at least 25 times, even though I've not used it in weeks, before I go to bed and stuff like that. You know, checking the door before I go out, etc., and just didn't have to do that. You know, at one particular time when I used psychedelics. And I think it's so interesting that, like, these mental health issues that we have sort of exacerbate. It's kind of like a domino effect. This isn't going to be true for everyone, but for me, it kind of starts with trauma, and then anxiety based on that trauma, and then OCD based on that anxiety, and then I think I don't really know where ADHD comes into it, but it's somewhere there as well. So it's I guess
your compulsions are like a coping. For the anxiety and the trauma.
Well, that's exactly it, isn't it? So it's like, it's interesting how something like that we say can help us defrag, and it feels like someone's blown the fucking cobwebs out, is all of a sudden like, no, you don't need to do that anymore. You know, and I think that's why it sucks so fucking much that there is going to be a commodification of this in a situation where doctors are going to be sat there being like, this is what your trip meant. You know, I think that fucking sucks.
So maybe to counter a little, like, and this is what I was alluding to earlier with maybe where the conversation might want to go, is that as well as being, you know, that being the fact that we are storytellers being why it's an appealing experience for us, and that's the way that our brains process it. Someone in chat actually said, Kiri Magic in chat said, the storytelling ape, like what Terry Pratchett said. I think that's an interesting idea, right? Because as a species, we're defined by sapience. Right, and then there's a lot of discussion, and then we there's this idea of sapience, and then we're just like, oh, what sapience? You know, it's a whole huge discussion. Yeah. But I think one way you could analyze it is that human beings have apophenia. We have a tendency to see patterns in things. Like, for example, when you see faces on a tree or something, that's because of apophenia. And, you know, from one perspective, you could understand sapience as just this ability to, like, your brain is bigger than just like handling, I'm hungry now, I'm horny now, I'm tired now, like a rat or something, and you have space to handle stories and meaning and theme and this kind of stuff and patterns and things. And in some sense, maybe sapience just is that apophenia, that pattern recognition is all it is.
Sure.
And I think that all of culture is that. Right, is that what various philosophers and theorists call the hyperreal, right? The Baudrillard talks about a lot with the map maker's fable, the thing about like making a map as big as the region that it is meant to be mapping, and then like we exist in the map, right? We exist in the map, the representation of the place, right? I mean, even literally right now, we're talking on the internet, which is entirely like just ideas and entirely just like we constructed all these intricate machines with just hundreds of years of study so that we could talk to each other. We thought that was the most important thing to do, was to just link up and just trade ideas, because as well as the material world, we live in the hyperreal, the world of ideas and imaginative stuff. And I think that if we're talking about the future of psychedelics and their incorporation into culture, one effect I don't think capitalists will be expecting is that it may put a certain stimulant on culture, may have a certain like accelerating effect on some cultural like things that would be happening anyway. There's a pattern that people talk about a lot already, which is like where coffee came into different regions, where like literally the stimulant of coffee, like people had no social gathering place to go except bars and pubs, and they if they went there, they would get sleepy and aggressive. But if you go to a coffee house instead, you get really stimulated, and you want to discuss ideas with people. And a lot of historians now attribute a lot of like the Renaissance. Obviously the Renaissance is just white people stealing a lot of stuff. I'm not glamorizing the Renaissance here, but attribute the noticeable kind of push forward in culture to the bringing of coffee into Europe. Right. And I think that one thing that could happen with psychedelics is like we might just see the future coming forward a little faster, the future of the hyperreal, to be clear, because I think one thing is like when we think about the future, right, a lot of us think about climate change. Understandably, it's a very understandable anxiety. It's very real, but it's materially real is the thing, right?
Yeah.
And meanwhile, in the hyperreal, like if tomorrow everyone on the world tried shrooms, what would happen the next day? And if they still had access to shrooms and some number of them tried it again the next day, what would happen the day after that? And if a whole bunch of other people
because...
like, yeah, no, that's true.
You
that's
can't,
true.
You can't take
sure.
2 days in a row.
No, yeah,
but
okay, okay. But if a few weeks down the line, when they could get an effect from it again, they did, and then it was a thing that was available through the existing global supply chains that practically everyone was trying. What's going to happen to our culture? What's going to happen to the hyperreal that we live in? And I think to some degree it's going to shift forward. It's going to kick it over.
Well, it's hippie culture, isn't it?
Yeah.
But
the dropout culture, all of that. Yeah.
I think though that people tend to downplay that as though it was like the hippie culture, the psychedelic boom of the 60s was this thing that came and went, and everybody thought it was going to change everything, and it didn't. But it kind of really did. Like if you think about like the way that modern music operates, the way that like modern movies all live in the shadow of directors that like tripped balls and made weird shit. Even like the computers we're talking on right now, fucking Steve Jobs and every engineer at Apple were Steve Jobs himself, and I don't want to attribute any technology to Steve Jobs directly, but I'm using him as a kind of symbol of the culture at early Apple. Yeah. He attributes like a lot of his acumen to an early psychedelic trip.
Yeah, totally. So, it's in his biography and everything.
Yeah.
And
I'm just going to step away for 1 second. I just have to use the washroom.
No worries.
But I think that like another side to the hippie culture that is less discussed is that why did it come and go, and why did people think it was going to change everything at the time? Well, the reason is that there was a huge actual presence of the left, right? And that it was building up this huge movement. And a lot of what we're familiar with today, just as the hippy-dippy, lovey-dovey, useless old crusties that we think of as like smoking a bunch of weed and getting nothing done, that reputation is actually a capitalist representation of the people.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm not saying that was none of the people. And I'm also not saying that it was none of the people were, creepy cultists like Charles Manson. They absolutely existed. They're real people. But we were all familiar with the practice of picking certain members of a community as its representatives, right?
Yeah.
And actually, a lot of the people who were smoking weed, dropping acid, trying shrooms, were also involved with serious leftist organizing, and the culture was around it, and the dropout culture that Steve Jobs dropped out of college and did a bunch of acid for a while. He didn't do that by accident. There were people who were encouraging the use of psychedelics, who were also encouraging people to stop working. They were encouraging people to walk away from their jobs, walk away from the workforce, walk away from capitalist society, because they were actively recruiting for leftist movements. And then there were other people who saw the drug side of that, didn't understand the leftist side of that, right? And people aren't a monolith. There was all sorts of shit, and the kind of people that Steve Jobs linked up with were into the Orientalist Eastern mysticism shit.
Yeah.
They were into vegetarianism. They were into drugs, and they weren't into leftism.
That's right.
Maybe Steve Jobs' life would have gone in a different direction if they had been. And but moreover, then he went and took that that inspiration to go and start a company. Rather than to, I don't know, do something cool.
Well,
do something cool and good.
You've kind of got to look at how the state reacts to stuff in it, and it's if the state really thought that crusty hippies who just sit around and don't do anything were not that much of a threat, then they wouldn't have murdered four students at Kent State, who were doing they were basically doing the peace rally.
The
Vietnam stuff.
conscription, the massive conscription of soldiers for Vietnam, and to some degree, the Vietnam War itself was a deliberate attempt for the capitalist society of the 60s and 70s to seize its young working class men and force them into the system. The idea of the dispossessed, disillusioned Vietnam War vet, especially the one who's kind of grown his hair out and maybe has a peace symbol, but he's a vet who's been wounded, right?
Yeah.
The symbol of that guy isn't just because the Vietnam War was so bad. It's not just that guy was this naive 18-year-old who thought, let's go end communism. He's a guy who was trying to stop the war, and then they grabbed him and they forced him into fatigues, and then they forced him to go fight against communism, and then when he came back, he was completely dispossessed, and it's a conscious effort by the existing authorities to destroy leftist movements and destroy people's willingness to be in leftist movements. And it did a lot. It did a whole bunch. The 80s was one of the most overtly capitalistic moments of culture, where being a capitalist was so celebrated and so revered, where right before then, being an artist, being spiritual, being in touch with one another, connecting, caring about art and humanity, and leftist ideas, but they don't like to tell you that now, right? Communist ideas, but they don't like to tell you that now, were so popular in the preceding decade. In the next decade, it was all Donald Trump and Big Macs, right? It's because of a direct effort by the fucking CIA, by the US military, by all this shit to destroy leftism.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That shift happened in culture. And I think that, I think that Steve Jobs is an interesting example. Let's go back around on Steve Jobs. A lot of his biography and a lot of his mythologizing is about the idea that he brought together technology and art, right? And the ability to like bring stuff together and make new connections in a literal and a neurological and cultural sense, right? It has to do with that. Like it has to do with him having dropped a bunch of acid at the right time when everybody else was. But like I was saying, Mildred, you were just in the bathroom when I was saying, but like a whole bunch of these hippies were involved with leftism, and they don't like to tell you that now, but like, people also on Monolith, and
you don't even really need to move away from the early software movement to get there, because early software was all shared and distributed for free, and the understanding was that because everyone benefits from it, it always should be. It was really the intrusion of people like Steve Jobs and Bill Gates that gave us the model we have today.
But I think Bill Gates much more so than Steve Jobs, and I also think both of them.
I don't think Steve Jobs is entirely innocent in the matter.
No, totally.
Yeah, he at least had the was kind of keeping him in check.
I'm not saying, but my partner Natalie is in chat, and she just said Giron, which is the one of the inventors of VR, basically, was also a part of this movement, and is way more of just a hippie and just into sharing everything and open source everything, and a whole bunch of the older guys who are still around who are big names, and some of them are rich because they were attached to this project or this project, are still basically commies because that stuff was throughout the culture. But I think that I try to just steer away from the great man theory of history. And so I think that Steve Jobs's life path may have been, shaped by certain influences that were on the fringe of this thing that was overall had a lot of leftist thought throughout it.
Yeah.
But I was just saying, but the people that he chose to engage himself with was the people who are, selling the orientalized mysticism, the drugs, the minimalist philosophies or whatever the fuck, and this thing and this thing and this thing, but not the communism, just specifically not the communism. And I don't know how much it's a choice on his part, and how much it was just the influences that were around him, and also how much either of those matter.
Yeah.
We're all one atom in an indivisible universe. We're all the same being, but also at the same time, each of us has sacrosanct private property that must be respected.
Right, totally. Which again, the Californian ideology ends up being this anarcho-capitalist ideology that has a very authoritarian bent to it.
Yeah.
Because they've opened themselves up to anarchist ideas, but they're on the fringe of that, just
anarchist ideas without the critical component, I would say, which is that it should apply to everybody.
Right.
Which is kind of the whole point.
There's no theory involved. They're just these are good ideas. Kind of, no one should be in charge of anything apart from maybe me.
I just think it's such an interesting thing. We're saying about or Mildred, you said this just before, that so much was changed and people thought it was going to change in a certain way, and it didn't change in that way. But again, it was a deliberate effort by the US government to destroy leftism at that time that did work, and they did a whole bunch. And the people who then changed things were just way on the fringes of what was actually a massive commie cultural shift. And maybe you'd have Steve Jobs doing Apple, but Apple is just a group of creatives under American communism in an alternate timeline where the CIA wasn't so effective, basically.
Yeah.
But I think that the point stands, and I think none of us have necessarily questioned this point. I'm not saying we haven't done a good job of discussing it, but I think that it might just be clear that psychedelics have this big shift on culture. I think that when they were way more popular in the 60s and 70s, culture did this whole big jerk forwards. And I think that if they,
how could they not really?
Literally.
If they change people drive culture. So
exactly. Literally. And exactly what I'm saying, though, it's the imaginative space, right? There is this whole other ecosystem. I like to think about Dawkins meme theories and this kind of thing. There's this whole ecosystem of ideas and this other world that we've tapped into, which is non-physical, and that we basically live in because that's basically our reality is defined by it.
Well, also we have no other way of we cannot interface with it any other way but to think about it.
Right. Yeah.
All of it is fed through our senses, which are interpreted by our brain.
Everything is ideology.
Yeah.
No, but I think that if so much of our world is defined by that specific way that our brains work, and then we can get access to the thing that affects the way our brains work in the way that it does, I think that despite the disclaimers that like it can be used in all sorts of negative ways and doesn't necessarily affect people in positive ways, I think that the overall shift of a world on shrooms might be a shift towards communism, a really hefty one, actually.
Yeah, for sure. At the end of the day, it's kind of like it does the thing that we've been speaking about, which is it literally just expands your mind, quite literally. And I think that in a lot of the sense, people just do not understand leftism. People don't understand communism. People don't understand anarchism. And a lot of people, surprisingly, don't understand anti-fascism as well. And it in terms of opening up your mode, I guess it changes your mode of understanding as well sometimes, because it's like if people would only see things in the simple way that they are, then, like you say, it would shift people towards communism. It's like, what's that? Do you never want to be in debt ever again? You don't have to worry about getting evicted, anything like that? Fucking sick. That's a great idea. Right. Everyone should be up for that. Piece of piss. And maybe it might be even better for communism in the sense that it will make people who are sort of big advocates of communism, who speak about it in a very complicated way that is very difficult to understand, it might make them communicate it a little bit better and a little bit easier to a lot of people as well. This is something that I spoke about Sophie with, but it's kind of something I want to do, which is a really sort of like simple videos of like, breaking things down in layman's terms about politics, because these things are purposefully obfuscating the political systems in every country, especially the imperial core, purposefully obfuscating to make them completely non-navigatable for everyman kind of thing.
Totally. At this point, I think that communists and anarchists exist outside of the spectrum of left and right. We can see this, frankly, with I made allusion to them earlier, Peter Coffin's, Angie, whatever. It's like you can see right-wing communists. I'm not saying for the first time here or whatever, but I think that people who align way more with the right wing while explicitly pushing communism, and you can't question that they are pushing communism. You can question their interpretation of what communism means, for sure. But but people who are actually more aligned with the right wing, who are communists, because we've been, and the reason for that is that we, in the imperial core, we have been excised from the mainstream political left utterly and completely. We exist outside of that spectrum, entirely outside of it. And I think that is fucked in a bad situation, but it's also an opportunity that we can seize on.
Also, when you talk about how liberals, I've used the analogy before of the liberal mind prison, that liberalism functions essentially as setting limits on the human imagination.
Yes.
That the purpose of liberalism isn't necessarily to give people a workable ideology, merely to convince them that other ideologies won't work.
Totally, yeah.
This is the one they have left. And I think that anything which gives you the ability to step outside of, even momentarily, even if you don't, take eat the funny paper and become communist, you will have the experience of questioning it. And I think people learning to question things is always good. People learning to question orthodoxy and learning to question received wisdom, even if that doesn't move the needle immediately, it creates the conditions where the needle can be moved, I would say.
Spreading spores, as it were.
Right, exactly. I think that this is something that interfaces with something I've been researching a lot recently, which is conspiracy theories, and in particular conspiracy theories in the digital world. I think that sure, we love computers, right? But do we love them because they give us social access?
We love cyber, don't we, folks?
Yeah, we're a big fan. It's the best. Do we love them because it gives us access to other people? Well, we all understand that there is a crushing loneliness that we feel because we got access to other people, but not in a real way. So it's maybe not. I think a large part of, I'm not just going to say I have an answer to the whole thing, but a large part of the reason we love information technology devices is the extra brain space. In the same good feeling you get if you start carrying a notepad with you to just take down ideas, like, or just using the notepad app on your phone, like it's that, but much larger scale. And the ability to communicate online is a part of that. Like it's that we love engaging with ideas. And I think in some ways it's similar to some of the psychedelic effects maybe. But the point I was going to say about conspiracy theories online is that there's this idea of stigmatized knowledge in study of conspiracy theories. And you were saying like questioning received wisdom is really important. And something we've already seen a whole load on the internet is people questioning received wisdom and seeking out stigmatized knowledge. But,
yes, but I think there's a difference here. I see what you're building towards, but I think there's
I'm not sure you do, but I think we might agree. But you can please carry on.
Okay, I think that while something like, say, to use an extreme example, Holocaust denial might give the appearance of questioning received wisdom, it in fact reinforces a deeper narrative. Whereas I don't think that necessarily Holocaust denial is the type of questioning received wisdom one does under psychedelics. Because I think it's more so to do with like why the fundamental questions, why are things done the way they are, is more so what I meant. But
I agree with it. I mean, ultimately, like what I'm building to, I mean, this is why I think you maybe don't know what I'm building towards. I think that the internet will be in future centuries something that historians look back on as a huge contributing factor to the creation of world communism, which I think is coming. And I think that the connecting of everyone's brains together is something that's going to like people are going to look back on and be like, oh, right, of course that resulted in everyone being nice to each other, basically. And I think that I just think that like the stigmatized knowledge of conspiracy theories is not rooted out by the establishment because of exactly what you just said. Like Holocaust denial superficially questions received wisdom while believing in received, or superficially questions this unstigmatized knowledge but doesn't question the received wisdom of a white supremacist worldview. Exactly. And whereas the deeper questioning I think is still coming. I think it's slower, I think it's building, and I think that it's gonna rock everyone's shit.
It's moving at its own pace. Yeah, totally. Something that I wanted to bring up, and this is kind of moving away from what we were talking about a bit, is that sort of like I think it would be fantastic to...
Oh, so we're going to move away from talking about Holocaust denial?
I think that's probably for the best.
If you think that's going to keep the stream going.
It might do, I don't know. I mean, who knows at this point?
If we keep talking about Holocaust denial, I'm going to say the C word. We got to move on.
Chat, I'm going to say it.
I'm gonna have a gamer moment.
It's gamer moment. I kind of wanted to. I wasn't moving away just because of that. I think it's definitely based to bring that up. But I think it's really important when we're discussing about. But you brought up before, Mildred. Was it Maria?
Sabina.
Maria Babina? Sabina. Maria Sabina. Like. In terms of sort of indigenous cultures that have used psychedelics before us, which is obviously where we've discovered psychedelic use. I think it would be really, valuable to have an indigenous voice sort of be involved in this discussion, because there is so much that has been sort of stolen regarding that. And it all comes down as well to what we were talking about before. You were talking about Orientalism, mysticism kind of stuff. I think we kind of see a lot of that where people sort of fetishize Native American cultures and indigenous cultures that have been known to do psychedelics in that kind of regard. It's definitely something that I've seen among the crusty hippie culture in Manchester that is not the good crusty hippie culture. It's the kind of like, sup bro, can I borrow anything? Kind of culture, which isn't that bad if you've got stuff to lend. It's good to lend people stuff and have faith in them, but not when they just never ever return the favor. Anyway, whatever. That's in fact, no, I'd take that back. But what I'm trying to say is, that I think Indigenous voices in this are incredibly valuable. In sort of like, it's really interesting that Maria Sabina said, what did she say? I had it here. You said it before. Oh, there it is.
They don't work anymore?
Right, sure. Like, what else do you know about that in terms of that? And did she just mean that, like...
So, I'm speaking off the cuff, and so forgive me if I get any details wrong.
Yeah.
But basically, there was a journalist who had read about LSD, and he was going through the region of what we call Mexico, where Maria Sabina lived, and he heard a story about how they had these rituals with these mushrooms. They coined the term magic mushrooms in a Time magazine article about this experience.
Right.
But basically, she let him in on a ritual or ceremony of some kind where they ingested psilocybin mushrooms. And then he went and he wrote about it in Life magazine, and that got out. And then it became this pilgrimage where everybody was going to this village to try this ceremony. And the people of the village were like, "Hey, this is fucked. Like we are we have no infrastructure for this, and it's all your fault for like introducing these guys to it."
Yeah.
And she like died in exile essentially.
Jeez,
and her life was just completely fucked over in a way that I don't think has ever really been reconciled with. And but she believed that like kind of R. Gordon Wasson, that's his name.
Yeah.
Well, she didn't blame him personally. She said that like people like him, I would read me, took the power of the mushroom away because it was a healing thing. It wasn't something that you used frivolously or in her words to see God. It was something you used for healing, and it could no longer do that because of the way that its power had been diluted by the use of Westerners.
That is so interesting as well, because it's not... I've never thought of it specifically in that way kind of thing, but there's definitely... The more and more that I speak to friends who've done psychedelics and attempted to use it as like a party drug and just had like an incredibly horrific time, maybe that's something to do with set and setting, I don't know. But again, I have always got the idea, and I don't know if it's something that it just kind of makes sense in your head when you're tripping or post-trip or anything like that, is that exactly like that, this is not something to be trifled with. It's not just something you do willy-nilly for a laugh. It's not like, oh, let's have a little bit of coke. You know what I mean? It's like you are going to fucking break down so many things in your head that have been destroying you and fucking with you and making you feel like shit for a long time, and it might terrify you to the point of, you know, real fear that you've never felt before, and that is something that people just do not understand. Like, you can't just use this as like a bit of a laugh or you know. And again, the idea that it should be used as a healing thing is really important. I think all of us have experienced that from what we were speaking earlier, in that it can really, really just help you with horrific things that you're going through.
I would push back though on one thing.
Yeah.
I think that one thing that is dangerous in my mind, and this is perhaps hypocritical, and I welcome the input. I know that Tale of Two Rabbits is in chat, so maybe they can correct me if I'm speaking out of turn here. There is a way that we tend to treat psychedelics. The medicalization of psychedelics, I think, is a dangerous path to go down. Because I think that when we treat, obviously they're not party drugs. Obviously they're not something that you can just down at a party and like have fun. But I think to say that these are legitimate when used medically, but when used recreationally, they are criminal or dangerous then. I think that creates a framework that I'm a little uncomfortable with. And I think it's different for something, there's something to be said for the fact that like we are taking this substance from its historical and cultural context and that theft. But like something with like, say, LSD, for example, which is synthesized in a lab, like there's no real cultural or ethnographic like baggage there, I would say, aside from its like similarity to other compounds. I do think it's perfectly valid to take LSD and just have a good time with your friends.
Yeah,
I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
No, I don't either.
I don't think it's something that you can do on a whim. I don't think it's something that you can just like, oh, fuck it, I got nothing to do. It's 3:00. Let's drop some acid.
That's more what I was pertaining to.
Yeah.
For sure. Oh, yeah, I totally agree with that. And yeah,
I
most
think
people
your point had a lot to do with being prepared, right? I think your point had a lot to do with knowing what it is you're actually dealing with.
Yeah.
Obviously, people can just do whatever the fuck they want. They should just do whatever the fuck they want.
At the end of the day, it's not like you're gonna. I mean, I can say that to people, but you could do whatever the fuck you want. You could go to a rave and twat 50 fucking solid grams of it if that's what you're gonna do. I mean, that would be ridiculous, and I have no idea.
If you haven't done it yet, 50 is not the number. I want to in case there's anyone watching here who is like, great idea, Mule.
No. Never do that. Never do that. Never, ever do that. That's bad. No, yeah, sorry. I should really make sure that that's...
We haven't mentioned on this stream, but like, you can't really overdose in the way that War on Drugs stuff loves to talk about overdoses as the main thing with drugs. Well, you can have too much. You can have more than you are ready for.
That really depends on what drug we're talking about.
Yes, yeah. If
you can't overdose on LSD or psilocybin mushrooms, you can definitely overdose on ketamine.
Oh yeah. Don't fuck with ket like that.
100%.
And another thing. Also, sorry, I don't mean to cut you off, but this is important medical information. There are a lot of drugs that contravene psychedelic drugs and are dangerous to take with psychedelic drugs. So
yes,
please do your research. Arrowhead.org. If you're on an MAOI, it can be dangerous. You can get serotonin syndrome. Like, do your research. Be careful. Have a trip sitter.
And
yes, absolutely.
And this is why decriminalization is so important. Because stuff like that, you shouldn't have to come and learn that from 3 weirdo leftists on.
Well, isn't it weird as fuck that like people go into schools and lie about drugs? Like, professionals are paid to, like, literally their job is to go and lie, not to warn, like, it's illegal, don't get arrested, but to go and lie to you.
Yeah.
I had an insurance adjustment done about a year ago where they asked me, and this is a direct quote, if I was addicted to any drugs such as cocaine, heroin, LSD, or any other habit-forming substance. On an insurance adjustment. These people are like actuaries, and they're basing their data on the idea that LSD, a substance you really can't take more than once every couple weeks.
Nah.
It's just physically not possible.
Yeah. You won't even trip if you do. You won't trip as hard if you do, like, if you've had like a tab of LSD and then you have another tab. Like,
you can be absolutely addicted to LSD in the same way that you can be addicted to video games or fucking
gambling. Like I said before, there are other things. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's just nuts though. Like they just paid to come and lie about the stuff.
And so what does that mean for the bruv in the stream? By the way, you had an insurance adjustment. Like, is that health insurance stuff?
Yeah, it's like when you're gonna get health insurance, they like ask all the questions to find out if you're a good asset, what you're worth,
the beauty of
your life is worth.
Healthcare.
Wow.
Yeah, LSD is like habit forming.
Like, do you smoke? What's your deal? How many JOs per week? Like, what's that situation? How big are your feet? That type of thing.
Yeah. Oh,
no one's allowed to
Twitch
ask me
chat
that.
then.
So if private healthcare happens, I'm just leaving.
I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, they told me they were health insurance.
But I think that this thing that we've touched on a little already of like indigenous relationships to mushrooms specifically. Taylor of True Rabbit was in chat saying like there's a similar discourse around the ayahuasca spa. I think it's worth a little discussion, a little more discussion, because we talked about like distinctions between use cases. We talked about how to be prepared, but like, you know, if it is at the end of the day, people should do what they want. That still does come with this caveat, like you were talking about, that like there is a cultural baggage. Obviously, these things just grow out of the ground, but they are also something that were picked and used and had a cultural relationship that was had a different meaning for people who, who us three white people, our culture, systematically exterminated.
Well, I'm the only settler here, so I think that's mostly on me.
Mostly you fucker.
Yeah, I'm the real
How could
C
you
word
do
here.
that? Jesus Christ, you're the real C word. Yeah, yeah. But yeah, I think it is worth that being there. I think that it may be. Alongside, we already have like a discourse about that everyone, if weed is legal, everyone who is in prison for a crime like related to weed should be freed, and they should be compensated for time that they've already served. That's an absolutely that's obviously true, and I think a similarly important thing is like to talk about the baggage that there is with drugs that had cultural relationships to indigenous people that have been like specifically the culture, like specifically indigenous people's culture was a focus of genocide and a particular focus of systematic extermination and the removal of indigenous people from their culture, the removal of their culture from them, the outlawing of it. I think it is a huge baggage that hangs over the whole thing.
Do I think therefore it is immoral for me to do mushrooms? No, I choose not to believe that because it's too uncomfortable. But I do think that like one thing that I think goes without saying, I think in the company I'm in right now, but like I wish more broadly when psychedelics came up, this was discussed, is that like it's super fucked up that they have no voice in how these things are criminalized.
Incredibly fucked up.
The people with the most experience and understanding of this compound, of this medicine, they're the ones, they have no say in what happens with it. None. And it's wild. It's criminal.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, it's it's kind of like Terence McKenna talks about this in Food of the Gods, and I told both of you that I kind of wanted to talk about this, but I've not because ADHD had a chance to reread it or anything like that. But it's a very interesting book. Terence McKenna, I'm not 100% sure of what kind of person he was. You have to excuse my throat, by the way. No. Pretty sure I've got COVID. But I think that he spent some time with indigenous people in various countries doing psychedelics, doing natural psychedelics like ayahuasca, like mushrooms. And he noticed that the trend and the theory behind this is really interesting, but the trend seemed to be that pretty much everybody was doing psychedelic sort of whatever, psychedelic plants, because that's all we really have. We didn't have any way of refining them. Kind of before empires were a thing. And he notes the difference between these two types of culture as sort of matriarchal based cultures and dominator cultures. And it's pretty obvious which is which. Sort of matriarchal cultures tend to be indigenous, tribal based cultures, not even tribal based in some cases, just in, generally speaking, just
obviously
cultures.
Indigenous people aren't a monolith.
Exactly, right. Yeah, there's nuance to that. And it's worth noting that this was a sort of not systematic thing, because I think it just kind of happened naturally with the dominator cultures, the Roman Empire and stuff like that, and I don't really know how far it goes back, but certainly the main focus is the British Empire, the colonial empires, and stuff like that, is that these people abused the fact that matriarchal cultures were so welcoming and loving and prepared to sort of teach people and you know, do stuff like that. Again, not a monolith. About psychoactive substances and stuff like that, and they just abuse that to the point where, you know, obviously the genocides we know about happened. And he kind of speaks about how, like I said, everyone was doing it, and it's the theory behind it. It's called the Stoned Ape Theory. I think a lot of people don't like this theory. I don't know how much.
I don't.
Right, sure, yeah, I'd love to hear your thoughts on it, totally. This is exactly why I brought this up. The theory is kind of like, there's I mean, you could correct me if I'm wrong on this, but it's the theory is that when we were early hominids or early apes...
There are a couple of versions of this, right? There's the drunk monkey and the stoned ape. So
right.
There's like the encountering of various psychotropic drugs. There's also the theory that like our exposure to alcohol... first as like a thing that, you know, monkeys would figure out that like if you leave a fruit to rot a little bit, you can wipe yourself with it and it cleans you better than water will. And then you naturally are drinking some of it because it's also like a high calorie sugary thing, and you get fucked up. And both of these theories is basically that like our exposure to certain substances dawned a kickoff evolutionarily in our like brain size and stuff.
That's the theory, sure. I really want to hear
having some reactions already.
I really want to hear reactions. Yeah.
So I think there's some truth to the idea, undoubtedly, that I think while I don't think that we evolved due to like some sort of Garden of Eden, we picked the magic mushroom and we ate it, and then the spark went off and the light of consciousness began. But I do think that like a lot of what shapes us could be said to have been developed from early experience with drugs, sure. And I think that there, you know, in terms of the alcohol, I mean, undoubtedly the first like human, like the first humans to go like, let's just stay here. As far as we can tell, did that to brew beer.
Right.
So like, there's something to that. But I think that where I get caught up is the idea that, as I understand psychedelics, is that what they do is they give you ideas, right? It isn't so much a physical effect. It's that the change that occurs in your brain when you're tripping is more so what the drugs allow you to think of. That's the novel thing about psychedelics. And I find it difficult to believe that had any sort of physical effect on the human brain. What I think is maybe more likely is that like it definitely had a cultural effect. I don't think that could really be denied, but I don't think that's what the people who propose the theory or advocate for it typically are trying to insinuate.
Well, people love to point out that when Terence McKenna was died and they examined his brain, he had a tumor in the shape of a mushroom in his brain. And it's like, bizarre. Well, this is the thing, and I think that you're absolutely spot on, Mildred, because it is definitely not something that just, you know, it's not like an overnight thing. It's not like it had a physical effect at all. I totally back you on that. But you know, the kind of people who love Terence McKenna are the kind of, surprisingly enough, although it's not that surprising amongst present company, and I'm sure most people in the chat, the kind of people who love Terence McKenna are the kind of people to say, hey, you should go to the Amazon and do an ayahuasca trip there. You know what I mean? And they kind of participate in this thing that happened with Maria Sabina in terms of like, you know, let's do cultural tourism of indigenous people and sort of abuse their, you know, rituals that are very sacred and special to them in order to, I don't know, have a good time, make us understand cryptocurrency more. I don't know.
That meme that's like the ayahuasca is a cruel mother. I figured out a new cryptocurrency. My portfolio is going to explode after this. All this is like the guy in the shirt and tie,
right?
Who's tripping balls.
Yeah, it's Joe Rogan, isn't it? It's Joe Rogan.
Oh, yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think my criticism of the Stoned Ape Theory is also from the side that the people who are often proposing it are Evo psych weirdos. A lot of the guys who are super into evolutionary biology and super into evolutionary psychology have a lot of questionable takes about a lot of stuff. Let's put it like that.
Yeah.
And the reason that they're trying to propose that this is the case, is maybe could be questioned. I think, but I think we are agreed that like this cultural kickoff happened there because I think that it had this effect on culture. I think that side of the theory is very compelling. That like, basically we started, more or less like started having culture after a certain point where we were experiencing substances that didn't simply nourish our bodies but nourished our minds.
We have not yet found a human culture that didn't have some experience with psychedelic drugs. Like
right, exactly.
They grew everywhere on Earth. Like it's
it's like everywhere. Also, if you look everywhere on Earth, that like people farmed different things. For example, in Central South America, like I think pumpkins and alpacas was some of the earliest like farmed animals or plants, and yet like different for every part of the world that you're in, and yet like you say, like an experience with psychedelic substances everywhere in the world as well, because as much as you need food for your body, you need food for your mind, for your culture, and many people would frame this as spiritually, you need food for your soul as well.
Yeah, totally. Well, that kind of the nonsense about the Stoned Ape Theory just kind of like going boom, all of a sudden human big brain stuff. It's exactly like you said, Mildred. It appeals to the idea of the Garden of Eden. Like we stole the fruit of knowledge from the tree of God, and now we're smart, which is just not even remotely. But I think that there's a lot of that. I think a lot of that happens because we've just had that bred into our quote unquote culture of sort of puritanical Christian ideology. Well, it's not ideology, is it? Religion, but
there's a certain cheekiness to it as well. I think people kind of like that it's this thing that is so subversive. Like what if it's the only reason we have intelligence? Like wouldn't that be a nice story? Like yeah, kind of, yeah.
Yeah, right, exactly. Absolutely. I think no, I think that's true. I think that's definitely a side of it. I think there's David Graeber talks a lot in his new posthumously published book, Dawn of Everything, about the Rousseauian understanding of history, and definitely it fits in there. Like Rousseau had this kind of proposal of the origins of inequality, that we used to be in a childlike, innocent state, and he and then interpreters of his work have made this a very infantilizing take on indigenous peoples, and that basically this is the noble savage idea that indigenous peoples are fundamentally good but tragically overlooked, and there's nothing to be done about it. We all used to be that way, but unfortunately we invented the television now, and like the trade-off is too big. We've got all this progress, so the suffering is worth it or whatever. And I think it also somewhat fits in alongside that idea when you have kind of ideas of a big kickoff to like this state. I don't know, like these kind of crucial moments in history of this specific thing. Like Rousseau describes that theory with an idea of a guy who first like enclosed a piece of land and said like, this is mine. And in the same way, the Stoned Ape Theory gives you an idea of the first monkey who picked a funny mushroom and put it in their mouth. And it's like neither of those scenes are as pivotal, because like there were always people who wanted to stay in one place and be like, this is my house, this is my home. And there were always animals who were tripping balls. I mean, ayahuasca is a good example. Ayahuasca was, according to folklore, at least, discovered by the indigenous people when they saw a jaguar that was like chewing on a vine and tripping balls.
Yeah.
Animals trip all the time.
And also, I think there's an element of it that is, if you really like psychedelics, there's an element of self-flattery of, well, this enormous step forward in human evolution only happened because people were doing drugs, and that's what I do.
Right.
Yes.
So probably the next step forward in human evolution is going to be me, because I did drugs. I'm the Ubermensch now. Nietzsche wrote about me. Welcome. I'm finally here because I did a mushroom. Bow down before me.
Yeah, that is.
Yeah, I'm the
really
most
true.
human. I'm the most, and I think as well, like the Evo psych side of it, like evolution. I think we forget this. I think we forget this in the world we're in now. But like evolution has been interpreted by different people in different ways over time, and like colonizers looked at the theory of evolution and were like, no, we're trying to, well, that's the thing. In some places, colonizers looked at the theory of evolution and were like, no, we're trying to say that we're different from the natives. So I don't like this. And then in other places, they were like, this is good because we can explain the ways that we're different. We have these evolutionary advantages or whatever. In the USSR, like some of the things that led to the Holodomor were like people rejecting to some degree evolutionary beliefs because of interpreting in a different way, like talking about like the ways that you can apply evolution to a greater like race instinct, a wanting to like work together and improve as a group or whatever. There are different interpretations, and
There's actually I keep interrupting you. I'm sorry.
Well, I can finish it really quickly. It was just like the interpretation that we almost all go on all the time now is that evolution gives you advantages, right? It's a very competitive idea of evolution that maps to our neoliberal capitalist understanding of the world. And actually, that's not what evolution is. It is what it is. Evolution is natural selection, and your interpretation of it is ideological. But so we think of it like the mushrooms gave you this advantage that allowed you to become the cool thing that is human. And instead it's just like, if it were true, then the way to understand it is that we just did because all evolution is just random chance and then selection out through random chance. I don't know.
Defo.
Also, just it reminded me of this when you were talking about just the different ways that evolution has been interpreted. People have this idea that Charles Darwin invented the concept of evolution,
right?
Or he discovered this, but he didn't. Yeah. He discovered he gave name to the theory of natural selection, evolution via natural selection. Before that, there was a lot of other mechanisms proposed for how evolution happened. People still believed in a form of evolution before that. You can see evolution happen in real time, like the famous story with the moths, the white moths that gradually grew darker over time because the factories were putting out soot into the air. But one of the rivals for our understanding of evolution was a guy named Charles Lamarck, who believed that in a form of evolution called Lamarckian evolution, which is things you do in life you pass on to your offspring. Right. And this idea is pseudoscientific, but it shows up in a lot of places.
Yes.
And I think that the Stoned Ape Theory kind of rests along those kind of lines. Is that like somehow the knowledge I gain from eating the funny mushroom, I don't merely pass on that knowledge by sharing that knowledge with my offspring, but I also pass on their ability to have that knowledge.
Right.
That whatever change took place in me.
It's this. Giraffes have come up on the Google search there, and it's literally like I think Lamarck said that like over time you'd have something like a horse, and it would try and crane its neck to try and reach leaves, and then its neck would be, and then when it had kids, their necks were longer.
Yeah.
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 And I think so for me, I think what I like in the Stoned Ape Theory comes from a cultural point of view, an idea of the, as I was talking about before, the hyperreal and our culture, and as an evolutionary theory, like if it's evaluated along the lines of natural selection, then yeah. And I think that's a really good way you've put it. Like it's the Lamarckian kind of understanding of it, that it's as if like you had the funny mushroom and then your kids come out better because of that. Is that is, I think you've summed it up perfectly. That's the problem with the theory.
Yeah, fully based. Like I said, I wish I knew more about McKenna, generally speaking, apart from like the kind of speeches that he does. Like if you Google Terence Mckenna, you will just find hours and hours of him talking about how he smoked so much DMT one time he looked into his own arsehole or something. You know what I mean? It's just, and like spoke with elves and stuff like this, and he never really talks about things like he goes as far into politics as what I said in Food of the Gods. It's like, okay, there's matriarchal cultures and dominated cultures, and that's what happened, and dominated cultures wiped out people using psychedelics, and then that's kind of it,
Early in life, he was a committed Marxist.
Okay.
But his experiences with psychedelics kind of changed his mind on that, but I'm not really clear in what way, because he was never really specific about what he meant by that, but or at least not as far as I can tell. I don't know, but it didn't seem to like transform him into like some sort of reactionary in as far as I can see. But I think it's more so that he's like, oh, I no longer care about the realm of economics, and I just want to work on ethnobotany for the rest of my life. But to me, Terence McKenna is, I think, a healthy version, and I would also put Alan Watts in this category.
Yes.
They're like healthy versions of what people look to Jordan Peterson for.
Oh, that's so true. Yeah.
Both of them recognize, Terence McKenna maybe more so than Alan Watts, but Terence McKenna will say in many of his speeches, like, I am part linguist, part hippie, part crank. Like, there's an element to me where you really, I don't know if what I'm saying you should really take all that seriously. And he had that sense of humor about what he was doing, and like how out there it was, that he never really lost like that sense of everything I'm saying is a kind of thought-provoking nonsense.
Yeah.
That I think is great. That's what I love about Terence McKenna. But when you get into like, Thought Wave Zero and like his beliefs about like how the world would actually be changed, some of it is just like, oh no, you just did a lot of drugs, man.
Wait, that's what Terence McKenna was talking about? Thought Wave Zero?
Yeah, like late in life, he had this like, it's so fucking obtuse. You could listen, we could play audio of him talking about it, you wouldn't understand what the fuck he was talking about.
Time Wave Zero.
Time Wave, sorry, yes.
Like that one-ism versus two-ism lecture that Jack shared the other day. Did you see that?
No.
No, it's really funny.
Well,
it's just okay.
Oh, no, yes. But that is, I would argue, a treatise against non-duality. And but
I might check that out. Extracurricularly to this stream for sure. Yeah, because that will...
The point is that I think Terence McKenna had a lot of silly beliefs that he never, I don't think, like, the difference between him and someone like Jordan Peterson, who does a lot of the same things, is that Terence McKenna doesn't say, hey, I'm your dad now. I'm your dad. Listen to everything I believe and act accordingly.
Oh, God. I hate him so much. I just have this, like, I really try hard not to let hatred seep into my life anymore as a sort of, anarchist, leftist, communist, anti-fascist. I don't want to be debased by these, raw emotions. But Jordan Peterson, oh boy, that just, that really
he is horrid.
He really
Let
gets
it
me.
flow.
Yeah.
Join us.
No, for sure. No, I think that's a really insightful way to look at it as well, because it's like, if you listen to Terence McKenna talk about how, psychedelics are good, then at least you're going to go away and do psychedelics, and that might deal with these absurd notions of, I don't know, macho, toxic masculinity stuff that you've got going on, or inceldom. I don't know.
If you're that concerned about it, I don't know how much you're going to be listening to Terence McKenna. He's not a very macho guy. He's
right. That's a really good point, actually. Yeah.
Pretty high, squeaky voice, and like.
Yeah, he does not look like the kind of guy. I mean, well, you could say that about Jordan Peterson, though. He sounds like Kermit.
That's actually a really good point. That's actually a really good point. I
think to some degree, guys, I think Jordan Peterson, because he's quite vulnerable, like, he cries on camera and shit like this. He's very emotive, very expressive.
Right, that's what I was gonna say. I think sometimes, cishet white dudes, I think they just want a really super, sort of, I don't know, camp dad, like camp cute dad, because their dad is not that.
Right.
So, yeah, that's right. Yeah, people like JP because he cries for them so they don't have to. That's right. You can just get mad. But yeah, like, I think that is definitely the best kind of, I guess, I don't know, connection that I can put between, like, psychedelics and leftism, because I think it's not going to make you communist. Obviously, we've already talked about that. It's not going to affect your ideology in much a way than, maybe all ideologies are stupid. That's kind of like the message that some people come away from it with. But I certainly think, in terms of like a personal development thing, in defeating ideas like toxic masculinity and defeating ideas like
there can be stuff that's in your way that is like cleared by it, really. That said, about ideology, I think if you do a bunch of theory reading and like, I think that sometimes you process big heavy ideas in a really fun way. That's all.
No, I agree. I think that's absolutely based, absolutely factual. Yeah, if you're predetermined to, towards your ideology, it's gonna definitely enhance your understanding of it 1,000%.
I will say that, like, walking through a rich neighborhood tripping is a lot different when you're like post-radicalization, because you're like, all these big houses, all these people have such big houses. Why don't I have a big house like this?
There's that fantastic opening scene in Blue Velvet. I don't know if either of you have seen it, but in Blue Velvet, definitely watch it. It is just fucking phenomenal. But aside from the actual story and what it's about, you get this scene of, like, beautiful suburbia, white picket fences, blue sky, there's a sprinkler on, all these wonderful things, and then the camera slowly pans down to the dirt and the worms and the gross things that are with the worms, and it's like, David Lynch has done a lot of mushrooms. Like, he must have done. He fucking must have done.
I think there is a side. Go on. Sorry.
This will be quick because this is a very frivolous point. But, like, that's my fantasy, is being in the dirt with the worms. This is what anytime I'm on psychedelics, I'm like, it would be so sick to be a worm and to live in the dirt. Like, that seems like so much fun to me.
No, I think that interfaces with exactly what I was gonna say, because, like, I think Mule described them one time as shrooms that, like, as a drug that makes you a goblin, like, really gives you big goblin mind. And I think that's something for people to know about, and the more people should know about if they're trying to inform themselves on this. Like, that's going to be a lot of the experiences. You're just going to, like, want to be a little worm. I think that there's, like, I think that there is a degree to which it really can feel like communing with like the dirt, the earth, the ground,
right?
Because, like, mushrooms are a fruiting body of the dirt, like, not even. Like, it's not like a tree that you pick something off of, but, like, just literally that there's this huge network, this mycelium underground, and then the fruiting bodies are these little guys that can mess you up. And I think, it's interesting. Like, you definitely do that, and then, like, there is, we already touched on it a little before, but there is that idea that maybe, I don't know how much research there is. There is that idea that maybe taking shrooms can make your like senses sharpen while you're on them to some degree.
Yeah.
And I think that like when you take shrooms and then when you look at plants, when you look at dirt, whatever, like you do have this like raw appeal of it. It's like, shit, this is not like all the plastic things that are in my living room, all of the like, you know, the furniture and whatever. And it's this incredible appeal of the earth itself. And like, this is starting to sound quite hippie, right? But it's like, it's literally like, I think that
you got to experience it because it just sounds like such a, yeah.
It sounds so stupid and it sounds so cartoonified, but that's because that's how it's presented in the media, because that's the message that capitalism
in the same way that if I
it.
started talking about gender experiences, to some people they'll sound like SJW Tumblr college nonsense because they've been fed a stereotype of trans people that is a certain way. In the same way, when we're talking about this experience, it's like there is a really powerful thing there that I just wish loads more people understood, that they have been fed a stereotype about. But honestly, like, I think that I'll say for my part, one of the biggest things I have is that I wish that psychedelics interface with the modern left more. And we have this absence because of where the ground has been forcibly raked away by American imperialists, where they've deliberately tried to clear the leftist heart out of that hippie culture, and then propagandize and you know, basically skew perception against hippies. But I think that we need more hippies. I genuinely think we need a bunch of fucking cringe-ass long hairs getting fucked up and being like, yeah, man, just care about the earth, man, wearing hemp shirts, the whole thing. We need it. We absolutely need that shit. We need the dropout culture. We need to be telling people just quit your job and just live off fucking dole and like have a chill time smoking weed and don't worry about it, because genuinely like there's organizing towards a strike, right? Which is an organized thing where we've got a plan. And then there's just like rot. There's just like rotting away the system by just spreading malcontent and just spreading chaos. Just like chaos. Yeah.
Yeah. Which is why Jordan Peterson hates it so much. That's what it leads to. Yeah.
Well, that's the thing that always blows my fucking mind, is that fool has done mushrooms, because I don't know how you can come away from a mushroom trip with this preconception that order and chaos are both opposing forces,
right?
And one must prevail.
Oh yeah, well, it's like Lincoln Bio says
like,
in the chat.
You should absolutely be coming away with the idea that everything is like a zooming scale, and that you're like on one level it looks like it's order, but when you zoom out you realize it's more chaos, and then you zoom out further and you realize it's more order, and you zoom out further. Like, that's the perspective you'd think Jordan Peterson would come away with.
Yeah,
chaos and order cannot exist without one another, and that all order is a regimentation of chaos, and all chaos is a defiance of order. It's like all of it is the first thing that should get obliterated from your mind, like the minute. Like,
it's like Lincoln Bio says in the chat, I went into a supermarket on shrooms, and the fact that there were so many identical items freaked me the fuck out.
And it should. What you were observing
things are supposed to be wonky and weird, right?
Yes.
Like, I bought they've been doing this thing at the grocery store, and I don't know if they've always been doing this, but like the bag of frozen blueberries, there's two kinds now. And one of them is naturally imperfect blueberries, and that one costs less.
Jesus Christ.
But open it up. It's just fucking blueberries.
We get an odd box. I get an odd box of fruit and vegetables that's like discards from the supermarket because they're like slightly the wrong color, slightly the wrong shape or whatever. And like they're just completely normal.
Yeah.
If you put those blueberries next to the other blue, I would never be able to tell you which one's which. Never in a million years. What they were doing, they were looking at those blueberries, going, "They're unacceptable," throwing them the fuck away so that nobody could eat them.
I actually like to do that in the supermarket. I like to swap the wonky strawberries with the regular ones, and then no one knows.
We talk about this on like a micro scale of like the way that grocery stores will throw out produce that like this peach is deformed, we'll throw it out, and that's a huge amount of waste. What we don't talk about is the fact that like even if it all went according to plan and all of the peaches turned out perfect. They've already gone through and like the biodiversity of the ecosystem has been crushed to produce a single kind of peach that they've determined is the most profitable kind of peach. And so like, that's what you're seeing. That's what's making you upset when you walk into a grocery store and it's all the same, because your monkey brain is going, there should be a million different kinds of things.
Yeah.
The banana flavor that's in things, banana flavored stuff, banana flavored yogurt, right? Doesn't taste like bananas that you buy that are the actual fruit banana, because the flavor banana, it comes from a different species that we used to grow, but we over-cultivated it and it all fucking died because we over-cultivated it. And now it just doesn't exist anymore because we fucked it. But we still have this weird simulacra of it in our banana-flavored milkshakes. It's so fucked. It's just so
I can't tell you, when I first learned that, I was so mad that I never get to try the good banana that everybody loves so much.
I'm angry about it all the time, every day.
Yeah.
Give me the good banana, you son of a bitch.
It's wild in the sense that like that kind of one experience where you go into the supermarket and everything looks the same and you're tripping balls and you're like, oh my God. You can sort of apply that to other things. Like, you know, you were talking before, Sophie, about the fact that we're all so connected, but also so fucking desperately lonely. Like that can be a huge thing. That can be a huge thing on psychedelics as well. It's like sort of realizing just how divorced we are from everything. Like, I have no idea who made my clothes. I've got no idea where the material that my clothes are made up from came from, and all these things will like run through your fucking head when you're tripping, and it kind of overwhelms you a little bit to the point where you're like, everything is fucked. Like, I should be able to like know who has made my pants, like, you know, my sock that I jizz into.
This is what you're talking about the
you know what I mean? Christ. Like, why?
This is what you're talking about the black pill side of it, that you can get a grand sense of it, but it is really fucked.
I mean, well, I was just kind of thinking, like, you know, it fucks you up and it makes you just realize that alienation is really bad and we should just, like, speak to our neighbors. And, like, you know, fucking just speak to people in the street. Maybe not everyone, but, you know, if someone locks eyes with you in the street, just do a little, what's going on, you you know?
Because just be like, yeah, hey, join a union.
Right.
Hello, sir. Hello.
Yeah. Have you heard the good news of communism?
Yeah, exactly. You know? Well, we've got to do that.
Exactly.
I think we need some hippies. I'm serious about it.
I know. I've always believed this, and I think to your point, people hate the wrong things about hippies.
Yes,
because there's plenty to hate about them.
Yes,
or rather, the way that the hippie program was implemented, there's plenty to hate about it. But a lot of that was the product of what it was attempting to destroy, secretly wrapping its tendrils around it and like getting inside. The same way that like the free love movement was insidious precisely because it emulated the oppression that it sought to destroy by kind of forcing itself upon women in communities by kind of replicating that patriarchal structure. It isn't evidence that structure can't be removed. It's evidence that we have to work harder to destroy that structure. We have
to one of the things
hippies more.
One of the things that's completely crucial, I think, is you realize like the way that communication and the way that the flow of information needs to be considered in those kinds of projects, right? Like I had this realization under a herbal influence that you know, like understanding of the Iron Curtain between the USSR and the US, because like, you know, and between communist countries associated with the USSR and the rest of the world, the capitalist world, because like if you look into the history of the Cold War, like it was not the history of the USSR and the US ready to bomb each other the whole time. It was it was a history of the USSR trying to inspire world revolution in all the capitalist countries, and the US saying, if you do that, I will kill every living thing on this planet. Right? And it's like that was the threat. And like the Iron Curtain existed as this thing to stop propaganda flowing both ways. And I think that's the thing, like with the hippie movement, like you said, like these tendrils of the fucking thing it was trying to oppose got into it, and you need to have some degree of deliberate, conscious kind of gatekeeping or like being I guess that's the best way I can say it. Some degree of gatekeeping is actually necessary in order to protect from the very thing that you are trying to organize to destroy.
1000%. Yeah. Do you folks mind if I just go to the bathroom real quick?
No, not at all.
Nice one.
You gotta go when you gotta go. Any questions in chat? Good chat. Yeah.
I think so.
Taylor Two Rabbit says, that said, the Iron Curtains are great for people who work in night shift and need to sleep during the day. Yeah, it's not all a bad thing. Sometimes you got to be sleepy.
My natural circadian rhythm would have me asleep during the day and awake at night. I live with an adult woman who, unfortunately, does not tolerate such shenanigans.
Damn. Yeah, it's weird, the winter, isn't it? Like it's just like, that's something I feel like I've had more appreciation for since the first time that I tried shrooms, is like seasonal change. I feel like I've got this definite appreciation of just like, because I've got a lot more appreciation, I think, in a more general sense of like, I am monkey. I noticed that like longer days are easier because there's loads of sunlight and I can I feel good in the sunlight, and then darker days, it's like, I want to sleep.
I won't do psychedelic drugs in the winter. I want to be able to like go out and like look at trees, and if it's cold, I won't. You know, because trying to put on my jacket is too much work when I'm tripping. It's hard to do things like that. I did laundry one time on mushrooms, and it was like, I felt like I was fucking in the Apollo 11, like, what? I gotta turn 2 dials. Like, I can't right now. Like,
yeah, I think it's an unfortunate thing of like, it's an unfortunate thing of when and where they grow, because like, this is something you were just talking about before with like communing with the earth and seeing the earth as one big thing, and then there's the non-dualism and seeing yourself as connected to everything else. Like, when you do that, like, it's fucking awesome. It feels really good to pick shrooms and then have those shrooms. It's awesome. And maybe that's like, maybe foraging is something people, I don't know if in chat people will be interested in, but like, I know there's at least one cool, again, informative, protective video that will tell people how to avoid getting in any danger with that kind of stuff. But like, yeah, but they grow when there's more moisture and when it's like a bit colder and more stuff's died off. And so they grow into the colder months, basically, which is unfortunate because of like, I can see what you mean. Like going out on a beautiful sunny day with blooming flowers everywhere would be the ideal, I think.
What are we talking about?
Oh, I have no idea.
Okay, sweet.
Who knows, man? Mildred Rabbit asked, I think, an interesting question. So what made either of you reconsider or consider a position of cultural appropriation as it relates to drugs? As in, did you already have that when you dropped for the first time, or did it come later as a retrospective concern? Speaking for myself, that I definitely considered it later. Like most important things, someone had to tell my uninformed ass about it. I knew nothing, and then people were like, "Hey, did you know this the really fucked up history that you continue to benefit from?" And I'm like, again.
Yeah, that's the same.
It's happening again.
Yeah, I had no idea whatsoever about any kind of, oppression that people of color, BIPOC individuals faced as a result of consumption of substances until I'd done fucking loads of them and consumed all sorts of like, I guess you could call it like problematic media, stoner movies and shit like that. And then I can't even remember the first time that I heard of it. I feel like it was I got into a really stupid conspiracy theory phase, which I think happens when you're just like a cis white guy smoking too much weed. And I ended up someone told me about newspapers not wanting to use hemp to print stuff, and I was like, oh, that's why weed's illegal.
Well, it kind of is,
I guess. Right. And then
that's a large part of it.
Yeah. And then from looking more into that, because I was one of these nerds who was just so obsessed with weed. I would just like everything to do with weed. I loved it. I had like an embarrassing weed shirt and I can't even remember what was on it, and you know, all sorts of like paraphernalia, like different kinds of pipes and bongs and all that shit. And then, you know, so I was obsessed with it, and then I learned about the marijuana thing, the fact that it was called marijuana in the papers because that sounded more, you know, Southern American, sounded more Mexican, and this was just something that multiple cultures, you know, were sort of, you know, partaking in, and it just all of a sudden became completely illegal, and it was essentially based around, I guess, from those two things, because I thought when I heard about the hemp thing, and when I heard about you know, weed is legal basically because you know, BIPOC individuals were you know, doing weed and the establishment didn't like that, I thought the hemp thing was bullshit. So I don't know, is it connected or what?
Kind of. So
Right.
William Randolph Hearst, and once again, speaking off the cuff, could get some of the details wrong here, but he ran one of the biggest like paper mills, and he viewed hemp and the ability for other people to use hemp to manufacture paper, which obviously important to his business model. He is a newspaper guy.
Right.
He viewed that as competition. So he, but like in order to frame cannabis as dangerous, you know, they started calling it marijuana to make it as a Mexican thing, and then
Right.
that also got compounded in the '60s with the war on drugs narrative, because you could tie it to protesters and anti-Vietnam activism.
For my part, to answer to Robert's question, actually, first of all, Nat, my girlfriend, is in chat, and when you said about trying to use the washing machine, it was like Apollo 11. She said Sophie got stuck coming down the stairs. Lol, too complicated. Don't fucking dox me, you son of a bitch. Stop it. Anyway, to answer to Rabbit's question about like considering the issue of cultural appropriation, I think a similar answer to what the other two gave would be that like I was told about stuff, but for me it was before I had tried
Really?
even as much as weed. I was aware of this stuff,
Holy shit.
and so for me, like a side of it, like, you know, I think it's something that people should do a process of grappling with. I'm not necessarily saying that people need to like just avoid that stuff because it's wrong because of this thing, but like it's something that I think the barest minimum white people can do is just grapple with it, just think about that stuff and try to work through it. And for me, like I was the kind of shithead teen I was shithead atheist teen, and so I was like fully anti-religious, real piece of shit about this. And somewhere in my teens, I had a realization that I probably would have had on shrooms if I had shrooms then. I was like, I don't care about this. Like, I don't care about fighting against religious people and fighting like, oh, they pretend there's a guy or whatever. I don't care about that. And actually, even if I think it through logically about what I know of the scientific universe, like there is no reason that like the Big Bang itself couldn't have been kicked off by some deity. There's no reason why the universe can't contain richer like dimensions than I am unaware of. And so I started calling myself an agnostic because I don't know. And it was around then that I learned about a lot of the stuff that you're saying about, you know, very much the same way, just other people telling me about it, me learning about it, and me learning about, yeah, I guess part of like I definitely learned more of it when I took the decision that I wanted to try out some different drugs. And so I was then researching all sorts of things about them and history of them. And for example, I already mentioned earlier in the stream, Alex Vital's The End of Policing, things like that history given there about the history of productivity versus criminalization, like that sort of stuff that I learned. Yeah, but for me, it was like, I had that realization way back that I didn't necessarily rationally know because I was such a big brain smart boy that like there's no spiritual element. And then I wanted to see how I could see that for myself, especially like from a scientific perspective. Like I became really curious about like, what is it that people, if I am someone who still thinks that whichever mythology, if I personally don't prescribe to any of these mythologies, then what is it that I think that people are experiencing in the world that leads to them believing in this stuff? One of the things that I have been interested in doing, and still am quite interested in doing, is talking to some of my extended family about good experiences with Christianity. Because for my immediate family, my mum was the first atheist ever in her family, and so she was very staunchly anti-Catholic. And my extended family, I'm have this curiosity about them still being Christian, and especially some who've gone further towards the church. That was a curiosity I had. Like, why are people spiritual? What drives that? What are the good experiences in spirituality that they have? And so for me, like, a part of being curious about this stuff, rather than being curious about like, maybe it's splitting hairs, but like, rather than trying to see God or something, I was like, what is the way that this might stimulate your brain that might lead you to go, I saw a thing, there was a big thing there. And then when I think when I tried shrooms, I then was able to say, actually, it doesn't make you, it's not liable to make you go, there's a guy who's telling me what to do, but much more, there are people and there's the earth, and we have a relationship that needs to be sustainable and symbiotic. And I found myself kind of realizing how true a lot of ideas that I knew of from the very same spirituality that had been criminalized and pushed away from the association with these drugs. I was like, I'm independently arriving at a lot of these feelings, these concepts, these ideas. And I think, like, yeah, it's really interesting to see see that, like, it can just provoke those ideas and feelings and sensations in you, a spiritual kind of connection to the earth, kind of thing like that. And then that's part of the grappling that you as a white person should do with the fact that we persecuted people of color, Black and Indigenous people of color, took away the culture of Indigenous people in relation to this stuff, because you are experiencing it yourself. I hope that was a comprehensive enough answer.
Yeah.
Two Rabbit, I hope you like that.
I think one thing that always really bothers me, and one of the reasons that I'm always like quick to bring up the specific example of Maria Sabina, is that I think white psychedelic users, tend to love the fact that there is a long history of Indigenous use of drugs by Indigenous people as a rhetorical device to grant legitimacy to their own drug use. But they don't care about like what that means and what our relationship beyond like the state, beyond what like the institution does, but what we as a culture of psychedelic users, how we interact with that. They take no responsibility, and they take no ownership of their own role in that. And I think that's something that I like, to the best, and look, I didn't invite any Indigenous people on this panel. Like, I'm just, but like, I just think that it's just something worth acknowledging, at least. Beyond that, I don't really know what to do.
Yeah. I think
that's what I'm saying. Like, I think it's something that's really important to grapple with. I think that the better thing is if you want to have that discussion, for us to arrange a time to chat with Two Rabbit if they're into it, but like someone who would be into having that conversation specifically.
I will say that one of the things that Two Rabbit said in the chat earlier was a lot of Indigenous people will be very hesitant to have that conversation because of that history.
Right.
And so that's like kind of, it's a difficult subject to broach too. It's like is like, I don't know. What if I get all white fragile about it? I can't promise that I won't.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah, I think that's totally fucking absolutely based what you said, Sophie. It is really important that, like, because that is one of the main takeaways I've also had from doing shrooms. Shrooms are the main psychedelics that I've done my entire life. They were legal to purchase. I don't know if anybody knows this. I think I've told you, Sophie. I don't know if you know, Mildred, but they were legal in the UK until some random Tory MP in about 2008, 2009 said, actually, I don't think I want that anymore, so I'm just going to put that through Parliament. Right, yeah, it was just like a random decision. Like, it was just one guy who was like, we don't want that. Was it New Labour? It might have been a New Labour MP. Yeah, whoever it is, they're conservative values, you know. And so, like, when they were legal, I was like really young, and I actually had my first magic mushroom experience when I was 13. And I was the older looking boy that I went into the shop and pretended I was 18 to get served the magic mushrooms, and we all sat around. And it's funny, actually, this kind of pertains to this conversation, right? Because, you know, when you're already a kid and you do these substances that kind of make you like more of a kid, it makes, I don't know, the experience and the thing that I really remember like very, very, very vividly taken away from it was every single one of us, I think there was about 4 of us that did these shrooms. I think we had like one big fucking Mexican shroom each, right? They called them Mexican. I don't know what the relevancy is. I imagine it's just that's the Cubensis variety that from where they come from. The thing that we said about shrooms after taking them was like, everybody should do this. Everybody should do this. How do we get this into everyone? How do we give everyone shrooms? Can you just spike people with shrooms? Is that good? Is that bad? And it was like, you know, we sort of had the conversation of like, well, what, you just drop a shroom in someone's drink, they'll be like, what the fuck's that? Kind of thing, you know. And that's just what I remember entirely from my first experience from it. But anyway, I kind of digressed there. But the point of what I'm saying is, over the sort of, it's weird. It's kind of weird. I was never like a proper Christian or anything like that. I never really subscribed to any of that, even though I was brought up Church of England. And the more and more I went through life and did magic mushrooms and stuff like that, I kind of stopped around age 15. I don't know why. I just kind of stopped and I just smoked more weed. And as that time in my life sort of progressed, like the further and further away I got from magic mushroom use, I became an atheist, funnily enough. So I was like just very spiritual when I was doing magic mushrooms. I was kind of like, yeah, I think there's like ghosts and shit, right? I was like, yeah, there's stuff that can like travel between dimensions, and you know, there's all sorts of weird shit that we don't understand, right? That was what my general consensus was. But the further and further I got away from psychedelics, my brain was like, no God, religion bad, fuck it all, right? Then
I said to we were standing in Mule's kitchen. I said to him, "Imperialism is the culture of people who just ran out of drugs 5 minutes ago." Like,
right?
Imperialist culture is just people who are like, "We've got no drugs left."
Yeah,
fuck.
Yeah, fuck. What is going to get us off? Shit, bloodlust.
Violence?
Right.
Yeah, we're gonna kill everyone?
Yeah, okay. Yeah, and
we'll go with kill everyone for now, but we're gonna think of something better later, right?
Yeah,
sure.
Yeah. Well, we'll definitely think of something. Yeah.
And it's just funny, like when I went back into psychedelics, like tipped my toes back into psychedelics around 2015, that spirituality just came like flooding back. Like without even a second's hesitance. It didn't necessarily go from like atheist to like oh yeah, fucking definitely, there's definitely something there. But I certainly went, similarly to you, Sophie, atheist to agnostic. I was like, okay, I don't understand what's happening, and maybe we don't know. But it is kind of interesting just how these things kind of just like go, okay, right, boom, there you go. I wonder if you were looking at and coming back to mushrooms. Snow that says, no. I was looking into doing what Joe Rogan said, because that was the time in my life I was listening to Joe Rogan a lot. And Joe Rogan reminded me that shrooms exist. And I was like, this is a smart thing to do. I'm going to do it because Joe Rogan said. Oh, I hate
Rogan
myself.
must lose a lot of fans that way.
Right, yes! This is the thing.
If Joe Rogan was like, hey guys, have you tried estrogen?
Have you ever watched a chimp fight another chimp while on estrogen? Smoking estrogen. Oh, fuck. Yeah. Yeah, totally. Like, I think if Joe knew that I was going to become a total soy boy and start fucking men, I think, and other genders, I think that he would have been really sad. I think he wouldn't have told me to do shrooms.
I didn't realize he told you personally.
He did. He was like, DJ Mule, I know that no one else knows who you are. Maybe I was already on shrooms. I don't know. He just talked to me.
Yeah, I was going to say, how many did you take, actually? Like, Joe Rogan
appeared before me.
Yeah.
this was that 50 gram thing I was talking about before. No, just that's a joke.
That you were looking at your thumb the whole time.
Don't ever do more than 5 solid grams. If you're going to do it, you shouldn't do it. It's illegal and bad. Don't do it. But if you're going to do it, 5 dry grams of psilocybin.
Do not start there. Do not start at 5.
Nope.
Titrate, please.
Start with a gram or slightly less.
Yes.
However much you're comfortable with, and work upwards.
Yeah.
5 is the maximum. That's what Terence McKenna, if you took 5 grams of mushrooms and sat in a dark room, it's what he called a heroic trip. And it's called that because it's fucking scary.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's kind of like not scary in the sense of a bad trip, as we were talking about before. When you have like high levels of shrooms like that, it's more scary in like your brain can't process the things that sort of you're kind of learning. Like you just have no concept, like ego death and shit like that. Like I remember, I don't think I've personally experienced it, but I know that a friend told me, and this was just ridiculous. I couldn't believe that they did this. They got like loads of different varieties of mushrooms and they like chopped them all up together and like did them in like a 5 gram dose. And I was like, yous are fucking crazy, but they did it anyway. And my mate said, I was terrified because I didn't know who I was. I didn't know what I did for a living. I didn't know what my name was. I couldn't tell you. I didn't know how old I was. I didn't know what I was. And like, if you just dive into something like that from not doing anything like it before, these lads all said to me the same thing. We're never doing mushrooms again. We're never touching them again. Have I told you that, Sophie?
No, that's wild. That's completely wild.
On less than that, I've forgotten whether I am me or my wife.
Right. Yeah. And as well, and another one as well is like, I've done, this is something I wanted to bring up before and I can't remember what it was pertinent to, but it's poignant anyway, in that one thing that you will realize, and I don't know what the science is behind this, but like, I think it's probably just empathy turned up to like 11. Is that when we're talking about set and setting, I think I was thinking about this. I did shrooms with someone once who had like incredibly crushing depression, like really bad. She was really sick. And it wasn't clear to me just how sick she was. And when we tripped together, I felt like a fraction of that. Like I was able to feel a fraction of what she felt, and it was so like fucking bleak and horrific. And yeah, that is kind of something that I think people have to be aware of as well with stuff like this, is that I don't know what it does in terms of that, but I genuinely felt like I was sharing a bit of an experience. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I had that the first time that I smoked weed in a bong, because I thought that it was the same. I thought it was the same as smoking on a vape. And so I took 3 huge hits right away as soon as possible. And I spent most of the rest of that day in the mom dimension discovering how much I love women. We had this house guest over from America, and she was just sitting with me while I was just like starting to like become a bug on the sofa. And like we just hung out for a while and didn't really chat. And like it had only been a couple of days since she'd arrived, and she was staying with us for a month. And I had this incredible, overwhelming sense from just like being so fucked and like just hanging out, mostly not chatting with her. That like I was just like like Nat came home, she'd been out shopping, and she came back and she walked in with shopping bags, and I was like, I get her, I understand her, I get it, I get her. Like I was telling her that, and then I had to like become a fetus position on the floor, like, seeing a bit too much of the cosmos.
And I don't know quite how to express this, because I both do and don't believe this simultaneously in a way that's only possible if you've done psychedelic drugs. But it kind of do give you telepathy a little bit.
Yeah,
they do give you like, just not like with everybody. Like you can't read people's minds. Like you can't like look at somebody and tell what they're thinking. But like, if somebody wants to, they can share it in a way that, and like I'm speaking figuratively, but also I'm definitely speaking literally. And
yeah, I know what you mean.
Yeah.
So like I know exactly what you mean, because I've like very fond memories of this one trip where me and a bunch of friends did it. Like I actually, like, this isn't advisable, but I have tripped alone in the past. It's possible to do, but it's not advisable for inexperienced psychedelics users. But when you do trip with other people, it does enhance it in ways that you might not get when you do it alone, or maybe just with one person. And it's like, sometimes someone will give you a look, or you will not even like sort of be aware that they are there. You'll have forgotten that you're with people, and you'll be like, oh shit, what are they up to? And you'll look over, and they will just turn around with the widest eyes, like, but maybe with like a stick, and just like look like absolutely terrified by this stick, and you will know exactly what's going on. You'll be like, yeah, I know. You'll look at them and you'll be like, yeah, right? What the fuck? And it's
my first time on LSD. I was with a group of friends, and we were sitting in a living room, and one of them is dancing, and all of a sudden he kind of goes, and he just pulls something out of his body. not like a physical thing, but just like there's something like spiritually he's taking out, and he's holding it and he's looking at it. He looks at me, and then he throws it at me, and I start dancing. And then I take it out, and I'm like, I can't dance anymore. And I throw it at another friend, and he's like, what the fuck are they doing? But the minute I throw it and it hits him, he's like,
yeah.
And eventually we're like, we can't stop dancing. Like we can't just keep passing this around. So we take it out of ourselves and like throw it on the ground and start like stirring a giant cauldron that we're like keeping the thing busy so that it won't go back in our bodies to make us dance because we're tired. And so later when we sobered up, I turned to him and I said, hey man, what earlier in the living room, like what were, he's like, when we had the dance cauldron, or is that what you're talking about? It's like, yeah, we were doing that to like keep the dance out of our bodies, right? He's like, yeah.
I love that so much when you have like, when you can describe the thing and you didn't say it at the time. It's so fucking good. I have that with something called the log flume of destiny, which is a very intense feeling that I am moving forward, like hurtling forward, but like with a dip and then a slow, and it like periodically happens, and it's just like, it is the momentum sensation of being on like a one dip roller coaster, like a log flume. And so I'm just like, I like the first time I experienced it, I was just like, what the fuck was that? And I could only describe it afterwards. And then since then, I've been able to be like, while high, been like, it's happening. I'm on the log flume again.
Yeah.
I love that so much.
It is wild just kind of how like it is absolutely that though. It's telepathy. It's a form of telepathy. Like if you wanna call telepathy like the unspoken communication of ideas, then yeah, that's what it is. You know what I mean? Maybe we're not like using our brains to literally like, I don't know, fire magic out and touch another person's brain. but you're not using sign language, you're not using any conventional method of communication, but you are sort of just like looking at someone and going, I get it. Or like you say, have a dance cauldron.
Yeah. Maybe you'll have a dance cauldron, who knows?
Yeah. The rhythm is eventually going to get you. Rhythm is a dancer.
True, yeah.
I remember literally everything that happened that night also with a clarity that I very few events in my life. I remember like every single moment of that. I remember when we were coming up, we were watching it was like a shitty DC animated movie. It was a cycle ago. They made the Superman Death and Return of Superman animated, but not the current animated Death and Return of Superman, the one before that.
Yeah. Gotcha.
There was a scene where Superman is fighting another Superman, and he punches them into something, and then he comes up and he's got like a tanker, like an oil tanker, and he throws it at him. And I said, "Oh, so it's a boat fight you want, is it?" And that was like the funniest thing to all of us at that moment. But the fact that I remember that is like that's what psychedelics do. Is like you'll just remember every little. Yeah.
That's true. That's definitely true.
It's like I just we were that same day when there was the guy with the stick, there was also, you know, I don't know if you two have had this experience. I think it's quite, I've walked about on shrooms like quite a lot in my life, and it when we did shrooms first, it was in the middle of Manchester city centre, which is an incredibly busy city centre, in fact quite dangerous for kids to be in at that time. And one of the things that is very prevalent in trips and stuff like that is sort of like, if people aren't tripping and you don't know them, you have to just be like, don't tell them, don't let them know. They can't fucking know. If they know, it's fucking over. And then there's like this, there's this like desperate attempt to act normal.
Yeah. But also, you desperately want to tell them.
Yeah.
You want them to,
you want to just walk up to them and be like, yo, guess what I've done?
Wouldn't it be so great though?
Yeah, you're like, you know, you'll be like, right, just act normal. And everyone will think that they are walking normal. But you'll like turn around to your friend and your friend will be like this or something. And then your other friend will just be going, it's impossible. Absolutely impossible, you know?
We tried to cross a parking lot one time and it was like fucking traveling to Mordor. It was like, we turned away and two of our friends got lost on a flat parking lot. And when we met up with them like 10 minutes later, they were like, where were you? Some kids skateboarded at us very aggressively.
That's the thing, yeah, because like sometimes you'll have this like really like collective goal. You'll be like, right, we need to get to Tesco, let's get across this supermarket, and then all of a sudden the skateboard fellas come and you just like without even speaking, like, we gotta go, this is it, the jig's up.
So you can't walk too close to someone on a skateboard, it's just gonna fuck everything up.
The vibe
this
will
is
die.
Before I learned to skateboard, by the way. I would have changed some minds and hearts that day if I had known.
Oh yeah, for sure. Tale of Two Rabbits says, be warned though, similar substances will elicit the memory. I was coming out of surgery and the charge nurse asked me, so how do you feel? And I answered, well, the festival was great, but I couldn't find my clothes. It was a Catholic hospital. She left the room and refused to speak to me again.
That's fun.
Yeah, holy shit.
I mean, how good was talking to her going to be anyway?
Right, exactly. I don't think you lost out.
You've all heard the story of the night clown, right?
I'd like to hear it again.
It was a night just like tonight. I was, but when I moved to Toronto for the first time, my friends and I, they were seeing me off, and so we kind of spontaneously decided to do mushrooms. And then I got kind of freaked out because one of them was climbing a bunch of buildings, and I was like, "Oh, he's gonna get hurt," and I don't want to see that. So I was like, "All right, I'm gonna peace out." and I was still a little. I was like coming down. I was still a little bit feeling it. And I walked past this gas station, and I had this like sudden wave of anxiety where I was like, I'm so thirsty. Because for anyone that doesn't know, they dehydrate you, they make you sweat, and they make you and piss a lot too, because your body's trying to flush out the poison you've ingested. But so I was like, I need to get like a Gatorade or something, but I'm so worried I'm going to be judged. I was like, okay, well, fuck it. No one's going to know. I'll just go in, I'll get the Gatorade, and I just won't make eye contact with the guy.
Right.
And I walk in the gas station, and there at the front of the store, I am high on LSD. There is a gentleman. He is wearing clown makeup, a pork pie hat, plaid shirt, jorts, wallet chain.
It's the jorts, I think, that makes it for me.
Right.
I think it's the jorts, personally.
Yeah. And I think immediately I'm like, that's not happening. I can't react to this. I can't let everyone know that I'm seeing a night clown because they're going to know I'm on drugs. So I go and I get a Gatorade, and I come up to the guy on the counter, and he's like looking past me, and he looks at me and he goes, and in that moment I realized the night clown's real. There's a night, and I was like, I can't explain it to you. Like, I don't know.
So wait, did you like skip line? Did you like jump?
No, he was at the like the ice cream fridge. Like,
yeah.
You know those ones that are like the freezer with the thing aside?
Okay.
He was at that, like trying to pick out what ice cream he wanted. I didn't skip him in line.
Ice cream loving night clown.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
That would have been extra funny, I think, if you just skipped in line. Just because you thought he wasn't real.
Oh, jeez.
Brilliant. Well, yeah, I think I've touched on pretty much everything I want to touch on in, the best way that I could touch upon it, unless you guys have got anything else you want to bring to the table.
Oh, final warning. Watch out for mirrors. They're hard. Just be careful on that one.
Don't ever look at yourself in a mirror when you're tripping. It's just not great.
Your literalistic monkey brain is going to be like, that's another physical room through there, and there's another physical self who's standing in that room looking right back at me, and then you're going to reach out and touch the mirror, and it's going to warp reality, and you're going to freak out. And that's not... I mean, it's funny. It is funny. But just be careful. I'm just being careful.
It might not even be scary. It might just be like my face is turning old and young and cycling in between the two rapidly, and now I'm experiencing 1,000 lifetimes by looking at my face.
Yeah.
I had a friend warn me before my first trip, be careful about mirrors. Don't go look in the mirror. You'll stay there. It's a trap. Like, don't do it. And then when I had my first trip, I told her, we looked in the mirror, and then it looked like another room. We reached out to touch it, and she immediately went, "Oh, you never touch the mirror."
Yeah, I had more of a similar experience to
How
Mildred.
are you not afraid that you're like to me, I can't look at them because I'm so afraid. I'm in such a fragile state that if I look up at my reflection, and if my entire life my reflection has been alive but choosing to wait for the perfect time to scare me by doing something I'm not doing, it would be the perfect time to do it, and I don't want to. I don't want. Yeah.
That then would be the time. That would be the time.
Yeah.
Boggle in chat says, "Don't look at the MILF in the mirror." In all seriousness, gender, like the thing before about gender dysphoria disappearing, it can be a wild thing to see your own reflection as a person. Where I don't know. I guess it's that we usually look at our reflections and are like just studying it for details to minutely like groom ourselves the way we like. And so there is something like where you're tripping and you see yourself in the mirror as a person instead, and you're like, whoa, like, oh, okay, transition's great, estrogen is magic, well, everything's fine in the world. Why bother being dysphoric ever again? Cool.
Yeah, that's fucking dope, by the way. That's like...
I think it's a very similar to what you said before about like OCD and kind of inner self telling you like, chill out, you don't need to bother with this thing. Kind of felt all like that, like just an inner self being like, don't worry about that, that's silly.
Yeah, which is super fucking cool, right? Just to kind of know that there's some version of you really deep inside yourself that really actually gives a fuck about you and, knows that you're super cool and everything's great. I'm cringe and that's based.
Yeah, yeah. I'll never be based and that's not cringe.
Right.
Yeah. The Wreck-It Ralph thing. Okay. Okay. I just wanted to warn about the mirror before I went. There we go.
Yeah, no, definitely.
I'm gonna go catch the end of my premiere.
Try not to smoke weed too early in a trip.
Oh, because it cancels it out. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah.
You'll end your trip too soon.
And
also, or make it a lot worse.
Yeah, it depends. Yeah.
And shrooms will last for like 4 to 6 hours, depending on your metabolism, depending on what you've eaten, blah, blah, blah. Like, if you are in it and you're like, I broke my brain, I'm going to be like this forever. Check the time and see how much longer you have left, because you have a concrete amount of time left until it just goes away again. Yeah. Don't worry about it.
Also, try walking to a different room.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I've never tried
just literally.
Oh, holy shit. That's some cool techers. Yeah, there you go. Well, just to finish up, Mildred, where can we find you?
As I said, the best place to find me is you go to youtube.com/Sophie from Mars, go to the channels section, scroll down to the channels I like. You'll usually be able to find me there, I think. Unless, if they change it, then I'm fucked. I don't know how people are going to find my channel.
It's weird that so many people are finding your channel and not subscribing to me on the way. I think that's just rude.
That's true. That is very true. I agree.
Well, they have a chance to fix that if they're going to my channel now.
No, but I've dropped a link to Thought Slime's YouTube channel in the chat. Go follow them there, and also on the link to Thought Slime's Twitch as well, because you do streams, don't you?
I do.
Yeah, which are very cool and based. Sometimes Bobby Duke pops up.
Oh yeah,
Bobby, and Sophie. What about you?
Oh, I'm Sophie from Mars. Check out my Patreon, patreon.com/Sophie from Mars. The things that I do are video essays about media and politics. Next month, throughout January and into February, I'm going to be releasing a series called Organizing Interviews, where I talk to organizers and activists about what they do and how you can do it too. And I'm also going to be starting a show on January 2nd, every Sunday from then, on the Twitch channel Bad Bunny.
That's right.
With Bad Bunny, Tim from Conquest of Dread, and our beloved Mule, where we talk about the concrete steps towards a better world. And it's going to be pretty cool and pretty based. So check that out too. That's starting January 2nd on Bad Bunny's channel. Yeah. But yeah, to support me and see basically everything I do, go to patreon.com/Sophie from Mars.
Thank you so much, both of you, for joining me. It's been an absolute pleasure. Lovely to finally chat to you, Mildred. And Sophie, I will see you soon, I'm sure.
Pleasure as always.
Good night.
Good night.
See you in a bit.